Let's do it. Ready? Okay, well, they're giving me the signal that the mics are live and we're ready to go here. So let me welcome everyone to the Charter Review Commission meeting here on March the 24th, 2010. We appreciate everyone coming and getting started. This is our first meeting that is on television, so I wanted to remind the members that you never know where the TV's pointing, so keep that in mind. And other than that, we appreciate everyone being here and look forward to a good meeting tonight. So we'll call this meeting to order officially. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of February 17th. If you members have reviewed those, they were sent to you earlier. Mr. Martin's moved that we approve the minutes. Are there any comments or additions, deletions to the minutes? I think they were sent out in plenty of time. Hearing none, those in favor say aye of approving the minutes. Those opposed, no. Okay, thank you so much. At this time, we'll pause for a few minutes and just we'd like to go around the membership of the commission here and give everyone an opportunity if they have anything to say. First, I want to thank all the members that participated in the visits to the city commissions. We visited all the city commissions now, and I went back and watched a couple of them on TV and also read the minutes on a couple of them. So it sounded like everyone did a good job, and I appreciate that. And hopefully that helped inform our citizens of this process, and we're doing everything that we can to be as open and as transparent as possible. But does any member wish to make any comments just for the good of the order, so to speak, here as we get things going? I'm going to get swivel head here tonight, trying to look around. I'm not seeing any hands go up. So we'll move on from that. At this time, we've set aside some time then for any citizens that may wish to comment. We may or may not. We're at the process now where we're taking up various issues that we're going to consider and turn over to our attorney, Sarah Blakely, who's here on the front row, to look at and come up with language so that we can give them consideration at our next meeting. But we're taking some ballots at this time to see if there's any interest at all. And so we're happy to hear your comments if anybody would like to speak at this time, or you might want to wait until if something comes up on the actual as a motion later. We're happy to hear of anyone. Anybody like to speak tonight just to the membership while we're here for good? If you just come up to any of the podiums here, and if you would just state your name so that we'll have it, and we'd appreciate that very much. And if you could keep your comments about 3 to 5 minutes, we'd appreciate that too. Mr. Ulrich, good to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, sir. My name is Ivan Ulrich, and I'm here tonight representing the Builders Association of North Central Florida. I'm the president. We have a lot of members here tonight, very interested in the work that you're doing, and look forward to working with you. We have come up with 3 issues that are important to the Builders Association. And as I understand it, under the home rule, the Charter Commission, we're looking to get charter commissioners as one of the items on the list, which would give us local control, take care of our own commission. And so we want to promote that, one, as a top subject. And then under that, our important issues are nonpartisan elections, which would get everyone to vote, the chance to vote. We have, right now we have elections that are held what am I looking for there?
Primary.
The primaries, they're at large. Thank you very much. At large. And so we would like to have nonpartisan elections in the primaries and get everybody involved in the primary elections. Term limits for county commissioners. 8 years, 2 4-year terms. We think that would be appropriate. That would give commissioners a chance to come up here and serve, be a part of the process, and then serve their time, serve the citizens, and move on. And third, and I think most importantly, is 5 single-member districts. I think there's a proposal out there to have 5 single-member districts that would put those districts around the county, and we'd get good representation from all the areas in the county. And so I think that's very important to representing the citizens of Alachua County. And with that, I appreciate your time.
We thank you for your time. We appreciate those comments. Yes, sir. Mr. Brinkman.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your first point that you wanted about the charter review. You want term
Well,
limits?
as the way I understand it, that we have a home rule, and under that, we want to have charter commissioners.
I think he was talking about Mr. Little's proposal.
Oh, okay, I understand what you're saying, converting the county commission
Yeah,
to
at some
charter
point, we
commission.
have to approve that, and then,
Right.
and then under that.
I'm sorry, I was
Get
confused.
the other items.
We're with you. I understand. Any other comments or questions, Mr. Ulrich? If not, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank y'all.
Yes, ma'am. If you just state your name for us and tell us what you think.
Good evening. My name is Allison Cox. It's actually a pleasure to be in front of this body and not being asked to have a project approved or not approved because I'm a local developer. I do have a handout that I'd like to share with the commissioners if that's acceptable.
Absolutely.
Is there also a way to have it put up so that the audience can see it?
Mary here will assist you if she's kind enough to be here at
Bill
night.
jumped out and helped out.
And Mr. Emmer, he's a good assistant, too.
Okay.
If you, yeah, she'll turn it for you. Yeah.
I'll get back over to my comments. This is assuming that we do change the commission to a charter commission, because some of the things that we would like to see that Ivan spoke about do require the change to a charter commission. But once we make that change, I think it's critical that the salary structure of the commissioners is looked at. What we've done here is, this is the simplest way we could figure out just to show the disparity that has developed. What you have on the bottom axis is several different bodies. You have the Alachua County Commission, you have the school board, the city commission, the mayor, the House of Representatives, and that's actually using Larry Creedle's salary, and then someone from the Florida State Senate. And the bars going up represents their salary, their current compensation. Underneath the identity of the different bodies, you will see in millions the basic budget that they're responsible for. And what it's showing is that when you have somebody like Larry Creedle, who is responsible for and I'll have to look back over it, sorry.
I think he's in the billions.
Yes. So 6,600 million, which basically comes out to the billion. Thank you. And his salary is $31,932. And we have county commissioners for Alachua County that are responsible for a $329 million budget, and they're being compensated, not without benefits and everything. This is just base salary, $70,754. And I think we've gotten to the point that their response is, we can't change it. It's up to the state. And as citizens, that's got to stop. We need to have the right to say, yes, we will vote for you. And if you think you're worth $200,000, then you guys vote for that for yourselves, and then let us respond in the next election. Or make them say, look, you know what? We really think our salary ought to be at the $35,000, ought to be something closer to what the average citizen in this area makes, whatever. I'm not saying that they can't set their own salary. I'm saying they should set their own salary and be accountable to all of us. I mean, especially in today's market, this ability to pass the buck and say, out of our hands, we're done with that. This is important. This is an opportunity for you all to allow the citizens of this county to say, yeah, we support that person. We think they're doing that kind of job, and we're willing to pay them for it. And if they're not, then we should be able to vote it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cox. Appreciate very much your comments. Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. I'm Terry Martin-Back. I'm a general contractor, and I'm a real estate broker here in Gainesville. And I have to go along with the last speaker concerning the salary that our current county commissioners are making. Also would like to see the limited government that we deserve in here of having 5 commissioners. And to justify why they're being paid for what they're doing. Also, what I'd like to see, not only would I like to see term limits for our county commissioners, but I'd also like to see term limits for the staff members. It's the county commissioners are nothing more than the spearhead, and the staff is the shaft of the spear. And when we continue to have the same people put the same petitions forward to the county commissioners, the county commission have a difficult time in trying to express their own ideas. But I would encourage you to seek term limits for staff members also. Also, what I would like to talk about here is your issue with airboats. We currently have a noise ordinance on the books that should be or has difficulty being taken care of because, number one, if we're in the county and somebody calls for a noise complaint, we're going to have to take 3 or 4 officers off the road to get the boat, to go out on the lake, to find this person, to justify them for noise. That's a lot of money to be spent and to take officers off our road to charge somebody with a noise ordinance. I relate that to somebody building a home out in the country 3 miles from a pig farm. And as long as the wind is blowing in the right direction, it's fine. But after a number of years, and the wind blows in a different direction, they come to you and complain about the smell. It's the same thing about the airboats. And please take a look at what we've got going on here. Let's look at smaller government. Let's look about reducing costs. And that's all I ask. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that very much, Mr. Martinback. Thank you for your comments. Any further comments during the citizen time? Mr. Emmer, please.
Well, I think I've written enough letters to the newspapers to know that I dislike wasting money. And I think that's prevalent in both the city and county. I have deep respect for our elected officials, but I sure don't like to see the citizen money wasted. I've been in many environments where I know when you're dealing with other people's money, OPM, it's easy to spend. We need to conserve. We are in a downturn in our economy. I understand the county has a downturn, and the city does as well. But there are a lot of frivolous things that we do that ought not to be done. Now, as a free citizen, I would not totally agree with the last speaker about staff, because I understand that good staff nowadays is hard to get. And we have some good ones, and I think the elected officials are the ones that we have to speak to. And if the elected officials don't recognize that their staffs need replacing, then the elected officials should be replaced. So I think that's what I'd like to pass along to you. I thank you for having this Charter Review Board, and I thank you, all of you, for taking it so seriously, and I'm sure you're going to come out with some excellent decisions. Thank you.
Just for the record, that was Mr. Phil Emmer. Okay, thank you. Any further comments at this time? Please.
I'm Laurie Newsom, and I'm here just as a private citizen. I reside in the city. However, I'm intensely interested in Alachua County, and I'm intensely interested in the nonpartisan commission seats amendment to be added to the ballot. I know there are many, many people in the county that feel disenfranchised because of the partisan nature of the seats. I'm also very interested in a single-member district. I believe that it helps our commissioners be held more accountable to a particular group of people. So if you would just be so kind as to take into account the number of people that I represent by speaking here tonight, which is many, 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 I know you'll take it seriously, and I know you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Brinkman.
Ms. Newsom, when you speak of nonpartisan elections, are you speaking of all the constitutional officers, the tax collector, property appraiser, et cetera, as well as the county commission?
I think that each seat ought to be taken into consideration for what its duties entail for that. But a nonpartisan designation for all seats does franchise many more voters.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Any further citizen comments here? Please come forward. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I rise at Brent Christensen with the Gainesville Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for your service. First of all, I rise tonight with just a housekeeping item that a simple request. I know that your next meeting is scheduled, I believe, for April 28th, which is a departure from the original schedule. And
We had to move to where we had television time.
I understand that. And my big concern here is that we have a Chamber DC fly-in at the exact same time, which actually we scheduled around your schedule, your original schedule. We looked at your dates and said, all right, we're safe going the 27th, 28th, and 29th of April. And then all of a sudden, because of the bright lights of television, you've now moved it to April 28th. So my request tonight is to just ask that if there's any possible way for you to find an alternate date to that. We have a significant amount of our chamber leadership who's going to be there. One of your commissioners is our public policy chair. He'll be on that trip, or was planning to be on that trip. Hopefully we'll still be able to make it. But my hope is, since we're still a good month away from that, that perhaps you all can find an alternate date, and that's just my humble ask of you all this evening.
No, we appreciate that comment, and I'm sure you recognize with 15 of us that it's not easy to get it all scheduled and get it going, and with so many other commitments. But we be glad to work with whatever the pleasure of the commission is.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate those comments, and thanks for alerting us to that.
Good evening, Commission. My name's Darlene Pafallo. I have a question for clarification. Talking about how people will be running as far as Republican or nonpartisan. Is it a state charter or is it a local charter to have the elections opened, and not, if you're a Democrat, you can only vote as a Democrat, Republican? Because it looks like to me we're losing a lot of independents that cannot vote on certain elections. Is that a local or is that a state thing?
Right now, that's the state law on those offices. That's something we're looking at. School board members, however, it's the state law. They run nonpartisan, so it's on county commissioners that is a partisan office, but that's all under the state law, yes, ma'am.
But the individual person that is voting, if
Closed primary, yes, ma'am.
yes, is
State
that
law.
so? That's a state. We have to solicit our state for that change.
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
Because I saw that happen in Massachusetts, and it kind of get everybody together to be able to vote and not discriminate.
But
Thank
that's
you.
something we're looking at and trying to work with our legal counsel. That's one of the proposals on the table at this time.
Okay, it would help.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Rod Gonzalez, and I'm a citizen of Alachua County. And the two main issues I would hope you address and hopefully vote to be on the ballot in November would be the nonpartisan elections and the single-member districts. I think the election we just had in the city is a prime example of people having apathy and being disenfranchised. And I think if there were, even though it was nonpartisan election, still in the county anyways, a lot of my neighbors basically don't vote. And they say this would very much help them. And I think anything we can do to, of course, remind everyone that it's really a wonderful right, duty, if you will, and their voice can be heard, that'd be a wonderful thing. To be honest, most folks really don't even know what the charter does. I was one of them until not too long ago. Once I found out, I thought I had to speak. And I think it would be a asset, to have you guys put it on the ballot. Of course, should it be constitutionally legal, if you will. I know that's a concern, so hope to see it there.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Gonzalez. Appreciate so much you're coming forward. Just so while we have, please come forward if you'd like. We'll be having 3 public hearings in May and early June once we narrow down the proposals we've got, and so hopefully you'll all stay tuned for that too. Yes, sir.
Hi, Mr. Chair. My name's Tommy McIntosh. I'm a citizen of Alachua County. I'm impressed with the citizen comment that you've gotten so far. Apparently, a lot of people are following your work, and your work is very much appreciated. The only thing that I haven't heard tonight that I would like to speak on is I believe you're going to be debating 5 districts versus 7 districts. And just as a citizen, I wanted to support the 5-district concept, the 5 single-member districts. I haven't really heard anyone say they've ever had a problem getting to one of their elected officials, so I think the number that we have representing us is probably a pretty adequate number. Plus, they do a very good job of deliberating as the body of 5 and come up a lot of the times with good answers. And I'm concerned about when you throw 2 more commissioners into the mix. So I would just support 5 as opposed to 7.
Appreciate very much those comments, Mr. McIntosh. Anyone else? Please come forward. Thank you.
Get the salary, excuse me, the salary picture back on,
Back up.
possibly.
I think-
Good evening.
I think he wants it back up.
No, yeah.
Shelley, if you can bring that back up for us, please, if you can hear me there.
Yes, my name is David Hillman, and I'm a citizen of Alachua County. All the points this evening have been very good, and I hope all 5 of them do make it to the ballot after your deliberation, especially nonpartisan, 5 single-member district. One thing I wanted to address about the salaries, I know that the county commission is considered a part-time job, and at $6,000 a month at a part-time job plus benefits, that's a pretty good part-time job. So if there's anything we can do to get it a little more in line, that would be wonderful. And I understand that we have to get charter commissioners before we can do that, but I think it's something that, as the review commission, you can do is really recommend that, because that's a pretty big disparity there, especially if you've ever met Speaker of the House Creedle. I mean, he stays a little busy, and it's not a part-time job. So thank you very much.
We appreciate very much, Mr. Hillman, those comments. Further comments here in citizen comment time. All right. Well, thank you very much for all of your comments. I agree with the speaker there that said they were very, very good, very interesting, and we appreciate very much all of you taking the time to come and be with us tonight. The comment, Commissioners, was on our next is the future meeting dates. On our agenda, the next meeting is currently scheduled for the 28th day of April. Just so that everyone will know sort of how the Charter Commission is doing their work. We've sort of set up a process of 3 readings, so to speak. As we go through and have received proposals from the citizens and have looked at them, then each of us have taken time to look at them, read about them, study them, and then in our meeting, our last meeting, any member could move any proposal that they wish to, and we had, I think, 7 moved at that time, sort of like a first reading. And we're going to do that again tonight for any further proposals any member wishes to do, wishes to bring forward. Then at our next meeting, our attorney, Sarah Blakely, is going to come back, and she's been working on this and has come up with some rough draft material already, but she's going to come back and say, these are the proposals that you have said you want to go forward with at this time. Here's my recommended ballot language. Here's the actual amendment, how it would look in the charter. And that will give us then an opportunity, and the citizens an opportunity, to review that. And that will call second reading. And at that point, if any of those proposals, each one will take up one at a time. And at the end of our discussion, we'll vote. And if it receives 8 votes, then it'll go to the public hearings. And again, those will be in May and June. Then, once we have the public hearings, we'll be listening to you and your other fellow citizens. At the conclusion of that, once again, we will discuss the proposals that are on the table. And in the final analysis, on the last public hearing, if time allows, which I hope it will, we'll actually take a vote on that night on the remaining proposals, and any of those that receive 8 votes, 8 favorable votes out of the commission, then we'll go to the county commission to be placed on the ballot. The county commission doesn't have a choice, but they have to do it by resolution. And so those will be the issues that go on the ballot. As I indicated earlier, thanks to the county staff and others that worked hard to identify a date when we could have the television and all, the 4th Wednesday was the date that was identified. Other commissions and other committees and have the other dates pretty well tied up. But if it's the wish of the commission, if anybody wants me to get with county staff and see if we can identify another, and y'all are willing to be flexible and continue to indulge us in moving these dates around, whatever the wish of the commission is, we're happy to do. Is anybody, Mr. Glazer, Mitch?
My only concern was we had established a timeline, and I don't mind the changing of the meetings to meet the to get greater input from the public. My concern is we did not meet and vote on these dates that were put out there. They were just, and the staff did a great job. This has nothing to do with what was proposed, except we as a body never got a chance to really discuss it and to come to a conclusion that it really fits our schedules. I must tell you, like Brent Christensen talked about, I looked at the schedule. We literally have established several meetings with our delegation up in Washington, and that schedule literally was moved. It was on the week that we were going to meet, and we literally moved it so that we could accommodate that. And we have the leadership, including myself, that is made all kinds of arrangements, be it hotel and air and so forth. And so I just, and I know it's difficult with 15 members, but the reality is I think we should have the opportunity to at least discuss it. If it comes down to the 28th, then I've got a decision to make to be here or there. But I would like to know, I guess the first question is we have to decide, does it have to be live television? Can it just be television? I don't know the correlation between being live and being taped and then replayed for the public, and having the participation and notice, of our meetings, being well in advance and get the public participation. But I would really like to see that meeting moved. I want everybody to be able to participate and to be a part of it. But if that can be accommodated, that would be great.
Appropriate and desirable.
It's desirable just as a way to open up and be there for the public. I can tell you that the chair of the county commission expressed to me that she very much wanted it on television, and so we've tried to accommodate that also. But that is certainly not a requirement that it be live. It's certainly, the idea is to have it open to the public and keep the public informed of our work.
Mr. Chairman, could we look at other venues earlier in the week? Is for example, the city's meeting room available? Could we find that out? I think we ought to do what we can to accommodate the request.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, I do agree that we shouldn't unduly inconvenience anybody. And I would echo that we should try to accommodate your question, but I wouldn't want to go so far as to consider having televised these proceedings as being a minor consideration. I think it should be held up to the highest concern. It may not be a requirement of the Sunshine Law, but it is well within the spirit of the law.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Gomez?
Yeah, I want to echo the sentiments of Mr. Martin. I certainly agree. I think that we should keep it in the forefront. It allows our public to have access to us if it is televised. But at the same token, we all have to be here as well. So I don't want to misunderstand what Commissioner Glazer is saying. I want to make sure I understand. Are you tying into the fact that we have a meeting time, whether or not we meet, as opposed to having it televised? So you want to make sure we have a meeting that's conducive to both, or you want to give one without the other? I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're asking us to do.
I'm very good with televised. That's fine. The real issue is that we never had a chance to really debate the dates, and we debated the dates, and we all settled on the dates, and we were moving forward, and schedules were made around that. We get noticed via email that the dates have now been changed without having the ability to talk about conflicts. And we're not talking about just mine, but we're talking about the entire board. And so that's the thrust of why I want the change. Then we need to come, and I agree. I don't mind having televised. I'm all for it. So to answer your question, yes, I'm for it. I'm not sure that it has to be live, but it certainly needs to be disseminated to the public. Let me just tell you that here we are tonight with almost a packed house. DJ Ferguson can attest to this. This is by far the single biggest participation we've ever had in 3 charter commissions that I've been on. And so we must be doing something right, but I don't have a problem with the public television. I just want to see what other potential dates exist without conflicting with other people's schedules.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Ferguson?
I mean, I might be mistaken, but I thought that staff had already done a review in terms of what rooms we could use and why we ended up with the dates that are outlined in the packet. Now, I might be wrong, But I thought that there were conflicts with other committees and some other issues that prevented that from happening. Maybe we should just hear from staff in terms of what they've done.
I know the communications coordinator, Mark Sexton, worked with the staff quite a bit and coming up with these dates and trying to make something work. He spent a great deal of time on that. Mary, I don't know if you've got comments or not to add to what you and Mark worked on for us, but it is difficult, and I'm not quite sure, members, how to poll you and find out what date later on will work and keep the public involved at the same time. So, Mary, any comments you might make to help us here?
Ms. Ferguson is correct. There was a conflict in this room for most of the days that we were looking at. I can't remember exactly, and I wonder if our person from communications could help me out. I think the crux of the question was live television, and again, it was the chair of the commission, not this commission, the Board of County Commissioners, that wanted it to be live. And I'm not sure whether we can do delayed television from Grace Night, but I can check on that.
Yeah, I think we can from Grace Night. Here comes Greg. You got something to add, or are you just coming through?
He's just bringing me a calendar. And
Oh, okay. I see. Okay. All right. He came in like he had a message for us.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Goodman.
I think most of us, and I think all of us would probably agree, we have no problem as long as it's televised, whether it's delayed or live. I don't think really is the big deal to matter. So as long as it's televised, so the citizens can watch it and even watch it on simulcast on the internet, as long as they have access. I think. But the concern that we have with Grace Night is we have, look at our public is here tonight. We can't rationally and logically assume that we could fit all these folks in Grace Night. I don't think that's a fair statement that we should do that.
We're past that point now. That's
so.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Also, the mention was made of using city facility, which would be the commission chambers. And I don't believe there's enough to seat 15 people. That's why the MTPO meets in this room. And furthermore, from my previous service on county advisory boards, I believe it is the county's policy that county advisory boards meet in county-controlled facilities only.
I know it's got to be a public facility or a public building. I'm not sure county-owned.
That's stupid. Mr. Chairman, are we using these lights? I just want to know what are we using the lights?
You're just trying to get my attention right now. The lights, there's only 5 lights, so I can't really go about it. Mr. Martin.
Yeah, I think rather than to continue to debate this right now, what we probably should do is, it sounds like there's a general consensus to me that it doesn't really matter whether it's live TV or not, as long as it's televised. And I think it sounds like there's a general consensus. I don't want to speak for anybody that we probably need to meet here because for obvious reasons. I don't see why we couldn't just refer back to the staff to look at, because it sounds like we only have one date that's really an issue, that maybe just look at that date and see if there's some way that we could get this room at a different time and be televised live or not live, and then stick with the rest of them unless somebody else has an objection to the rest of the schedule. It sounds like we only have one meeting that's a problem. I hadn't heard anybody say anything about any other
Would you like
meeting.
to offer a motion on that, Mr.
I move that to effect right there. What I did.
I'll second.
The motion.
What's the motion on the floor?
The motion is that we defer to staff to check on this. Is it what was the 28th?
April 28th.
April 28th meeting, and see if there is another meeting date that will be close to that date that can be televised in this room, and it does not necessarily have to be live television.
Okay.
And I would further add that if they cannot find one, then we will stick with the original date.
John, let me ask you a question. Let me use the button. I'm sorry.
That's weird.
Is the button working, Mr. Chair?
Well, there's only 5 buttons, so or whatever. It doesn't really matter. So if you just get my attention, we'll do the best we can. Mr. Grundy Gomez.
Mr. Grundy, that word, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair, I guess I want to ask Mr. Martin, the public hearings have to be, if I'm not mistaken, I guess staff could correct me, they have to be within a certain parameter or time frame. I think it was 10 to 15 days, public hearings. So I guess is the real root of the matter that we're having is going to be a problem with several of us may not be able to meet, and it won't fall within that time frame? Is that the real problem that we're having right now, Mr. Chair?
The only problem that's been identified is the 28th of April. The rest of the dates, nobody's mentioned that I've heard.
And in the essence of time, I'm just trying to.
Okay. Move it along. Okay. Any further comments then on the motion here? Any citizen wish to comment on the date, which I think you've heard the motion that we address the April 28th meeting and attempt to move it off that date. Continue with the television. Does not have to be live on that night. The other dates I'm taking that are suitable and are agreeable to the commission, and we'll continue with those dates. Seeing none, those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay. And that will be our plan from here on out. At this time, I wanted to recognize Sarah Blakely for a minute. She has been working. I think this will be interesting to the Sarah, do you want these? I don't know if you're ready to put those up. Anyway, she had the only admonition I would give everyone is these are not what is officially going on the ballot yet. We haven't voted on that, but we have voted to send these items to Ms. Blakely to review and to give you an idea of where we are today. She's been putting together from the minutes of our last meeting the items that at least 8 of us have agreed to that we're willing to look at and send to her to come back with some ballot language and charter amendment language to begin that process. This is sort of an unofficial draft point of that. I think she'll tell you that in a second. But Ms. Blakely, we'll just recognize you and let you talk then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it is an unofficial draft. The actual draft language has to meet some statutory and constitutional requirements. The statutory requirements are that the language that appears on the ballot has 2 parts. One is a ballot title, and one is a ballot summary. The title can't exceed 15 words. The summary cannot exceed 75. Just looking at the brief language that is up here, and I'll show you the other ones in just a second, there aren't, I don't think we're going to have a problem with that. With large constitutional amendments from Tax and Budget Reform Commission, they had significant problems with that, but I don't anticipate that for us. The other legal requirements are that the ballot title and summary have to be clear and unambiguous and actually explain what the voter's choice is. So we have to be careful for that, too. There is one constitutional provision that applies to most constitutional amendments that are proposed by a citizens' initiative petition, and that is that they address a single subject. There is some law in Florida that certain types, perhaps, of charter amendments can be more than one subject. There's some case law. I'm not sure how far that case will allow us to go, but that's an issue to keep in mind. That is more than one subject, so that some people call it log rolling. If you vote for one thing in favor, you're voting for another issue in favor as well. So we have to keep that in mind. The bedrock constitutional provision is embodied in the due process clause, and that is people have to know what they're voting on. So that's the test in a nutshell. Supreme Court has got at least 30 cases on Florida constitutional amendments, and they're a hodgepodge.
Will you pause for a question, sure. Ms. Blakely? Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Attorney, can you have 2 initiatives that conflict with each other? For instance, what I'm getting at is, without getting into a lot of specifics, I know we're going to do that later, but there's a proposal that Mr. Little put forward that basically encompasses multiple issues with the charter, and then there's individual proposals before us that tackle many of the same issues in different forms and fashions. So what I'm asking is, if you were to put that the proposal for the charter officers proposal that covers many issues, could you at the same time put one that covered like single member districts, nonpartisan, or can you put conflicting? Because obviously if one passed and the other passed, you would have a problem, would you not?
You would.
You would have a legal problem. We'd probably get to litigate that issue, and there's litigation out there. And the general rule is they shouldn't conflict, but you can craft them in a way that perhaps one says, even if both these passes, this one is the more favored.
You'll go to the second page there, Sarah. I know that's what we generally call, and I hope Joe Little's okay, the little proposal. And you'll see how that's crafted. If question 5 is adopted, one of these questions
Under 6.
says, yeah. But one of them says, like, if 5 is adopted, but 6 is not adopted, you know, and so we've got some work to do to make it. We've got some work to do to so that it's clear and unambiguous to the voters. I agree with Mr. Martin on that. And we've got we got to reconcile everything before we get to that point.
I'm also thinking for future deliberations that we might take them in a certain order, because if there's a large majority, I'm not saying there is, in favor of one particular issue, it may nullify to a certain extent the other issues. It sounds like what Mr. Little has proposed, and I'm not trying to say he's put forward that if that were the majority of the commission wanted that, it might not be any reason to discuss many of the other ones. I don't know. I'm just asking.
Right. That's the type process problems we got to worry about. Mr. Stringfellow, did you have a comment, Mr. Stringfellow?
I was going to say, I thought we would pack those together in the proposal.
Well, that's Sarah's job, to figure all that out and make it work for us, depending on what we do in the next couple of meetings here to give her. But the bottom line, I'm sorry, Sarah, why don't you finish your comments, then we'll
Well,
go
do you
from
want
there.
me to run through these proposals?
That would probably be good for the audience, I think, and sort of know where we are today. And again, I would caution everyone to know that this is rough draft. It's first reading. We've got a long way to go, but at least this is what the board so far, the commission so far has said we're willing to at least consider and look at. And we're going to take up possibly more in just a few minutes. You're doing an excellent job, though. You have potential. Go right ahead, Ms. Blakely.
These 2 pages list 10 questions. That right there is a lot for one ballot to handle, 10 questions. The first question, and then as you all have just been talking about, some of them are duplicative and maybe contradictory. So it'd be a good idea to chart a course one way or the other at some point. The first question that is listed is single-member districts for the Board of County Commissioners. This language is the exact language that's in the statute. That's in the statute right now, and that is authorized. Question 2 is the nonpartisan election of the Board of County Commissioners. It's limited to the Board of County Commissioners, and it's nonpartisan. Question 3 relates to citizens' initiative petition requirements for ordinances. Current charter says 7% of the electors, and this proposal reduces it to 5%. Who would have to, the total number of electors in the county at the last preceding general election would have to sign a petition to put forward an ordinance that would ultimately be voted on by the electorate. Question 4 also relates to citizens' initiative petitions for ordinances. It limits the county commissioner's authority to amend or repeal the ordinance approved by citizens' initiative for the time period of year 2 through year 5. Without a unanimous vote of the Board of County Commissioners. Question 5 is the beginning of what we call the little idea or the little proposal, or I can't recall the exact phrase that we had. It was compact, little compact, okay. Question 5 begins that process, and the concept here is to make a complete change from what we've got now of the Board of County Commissioners in name, with an idea that these types of ideas, even that I've just talked about, become more sustainable in a court action if that's necessary. What number 5 is do just that. Say, shall we abolish the Board of County Commissioners and replace it with the Board of Charter Commissioners, which shall be the legislative and governing body of the county. If that one passes, that entity, the Charter Commissioners would have the exact same duties and powers of the Board of County Commissioners under law now. That's the concept there. It's really just a name change. Question 6.
Can I ask a question on that, Mr. Chair? Do you mind?
No, go ahead.
That question 5. Now I know you're going to go back through and would this be the ballot language basically right there?
This is what Professor Little wrote.
My question is, I guess, if the specifics of that, like for instance, I think people are voicing the hope anyway that salaries and those types of things would be able to be set by this, and I think you've expressed a legal opinion that if this passed, they would be, correct?
No, I haven't.
No, I guess what I'm trying to get at is if this passes, what the mechanism then, I mean, in other words, this particular thing passing doesn't actually change salaries, term limits, nonpartisan, any of that stuff, right?
Those questions are coming up.
It sets the mechanism for future change, though, would it not, or would it be voted on at the same time now?
Well, that would be up to us. I'll let Sarah answer that, but that's the way it's set up. Is this sets up the domino? That's a good way to put it. The domino thing that allows then the voters then to look at these other items. But Sarah, please address it better than I did.
That's exactly right. Okay. This sets up the legal sustainability or hope sustainability to do all those other things that I've suggested perhaps the Charter Commission doesn't have the power to do right now. That's what this number 5 does. And then the remaining 5 questions go to term limits, nonpartisan salaries, single member district, 5 to 7. Those are the rest
Sarah,
of them.
you can point out that each of the 6 through 10, as we go through them, start out if question 5 is adopted. And so that's the contingent.
So what would happen is that if question 5 were adopted, then people would then be voting for the specifics of what that would really mean.
They would already be voting, but then it would determine what. That's correct. Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Mr. Bob.
Well, here's the question, and I think I'm trying to understand along with you, John. And my question is: there going to be a legal impediment to once, if say the ballot question is answered affirmative, yes, you can change it to a charter commission. Can they vote simultaneously on that Christmas tree of other items, or must the first one go in effect and then sometime after that, since the charter now it allows that type of change, that type of vote, that would have to do it at a separate time? No. Okay.
No. But and I'm not sure. But question 5 has to pass in order for 6 through 10 to count. Does that make sense?
Yes. So they can vote simultaneously.
Yes, they are the same November ballot. We can have question 5 through 10. If question 5, if it is voted in the affirmative by the electors, then we will count number 6 and see if that one passes, number 7, et cetera. And they'll be all at the same time.
Yeah, I have a question about that. Because that was my motion, that question number 7. I think I would like to hear some comments about whether that can be on the ballot without considering question 5.
It's on. She's listed them up at number 2
But
and
it
3.
says if question 5 is adopted and question 6 is not adopted. See, you have to adopt question 5 for that to
go back to
Chairman.
be in effect.
It is question 1 is single-member districts.
Okay.
But, and it is a little confusing, there are 2 ways about it.
That's why we got some work to do on it.
We've got some 2 separate paths here, and y'all have your own work to do. Do you want to go down the path that appears to make all those things that you want to do more lawful, or do you want to not have that sustainability idea and go for them just bare? That's really the two approaches here. So question 6 is If question 5 passes, question 6 says, do you want to increase the number of Board of County Commissioners from 5 to 7? With 5 being from single-member districts and 2 being at large. Question 7 is the single-member district for the Board of County Commissioners, again, assuming that 5 passes. Question 8 is election of the charter commissioners by nonpartisan election.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but could we back up to 7 very quickly?
Right.
Because I think there's a lot of people that may not understand that last line.
Right. On the extending to the county lines?
Yes. Could we get an explanation of what that means?
Certainly. That was a motion made by somebody here. Anyway, that in the end, when we're requesting that the county commission, when they redraw the districts after the census and when this all goes into effect, either way, that the only 3 of the commission districts would actually go out to the county line. If there's 5, then the remaining 2 would be more centered in the center of the county, which happens to be the Gainesville area. Regardless of however they're drawn, though, all the districts would have to be more or less equal in population and would have to comply with all other federal and state laws. But we would put in the charter that 3 and only 3 could actually go to the county line. And what that's doing, frankly, is forcing the county commission not to have pie shape that all come into the center of Gainesville, whatever. 2 or 3 or whatever the final number would be centered in Gainesville, with the remainder circling the county. Mr. Little, I know you had comments. Do you have any, or Bob, you want to?
Mr. Chair,
pull that.
This is referring or attempting to address the issue of rural residents who believe that they are outvoted by Gainesville, and so it's an attempt to counter the overwhelming Gainesville vote, which is currently separated. The current 5 districts are pie-shaped. They run to the middle of Gainesville and go out. And this is an attempt to have districts that incorporate less of Gainesville in order to give the rural population a greater voice on the county commission. The expansion of the commission is probably going to be required in order, because of the requirement that all the districts have to have approximately the same population. The immutable fact is Gainesville constitutes the majority of the population of this county, and so with 5 districts, in order to get enough population in each of the all of the districts, there's going to be substantial Gainesville representation. 7 districts, you're still going to have Gainesville representation, but it would be less. It would arguably give the opportunity for rural interests to be represented on the board. That's the thrust of what's attempted to be done there.
Mr. Grundy.
Mr. Chair, I think, if I recall what Commissioner Little's wording was, I think it was 3 and no more than 3. I believe that was his wording to this effect on this.
3 with no more than 3, right.
So this would be 3 and no more than 3 at-large members.
Not at large, no.
No, they'd all be
districts that go to the county line. Right. Okay. But depending on the proposal that's adopted and then adopted by the voters, it could be 2 at-large districts also, 5 and 2, or it could just be 5. Either way. We just hadn't got that far yet. I'm sure the citizens here and those watching can tell that we're using, putting a lot of effort into this, and so we've got a ways to go. But that's they can tell. Hopefully, you can tell that we've really thought about this and are continuing to think and about it every day. Yes. Let Ms. Blakely finish, and then we'll recognize you. Sure.
I'd like to make one comment on your comments, Commissioner Ackerman, and that is that what number 5 says is, yes, it does say 7 commissioners, but it says 5 at large. 5 single members, 2 at large, and I'm not sure that that makes a difference. So we got 2 at large and 5 single member districts. Any difference than 5 single member districts by itself? You might maybe I need to think that through, but I'm not sure that the math.
Well, with the requirement that only 3 of the districts can go to the county line, that means 2 of the districts or 4 of the districts are going to be basically concentrated in Gainesville.
Okay.
No.
And that means that the districts will be large, but that's how you balance out the population. At
Right.
least that's my understanding.
Well, 2 of them will be countywide under this
No, I understand.
concept. Okay. Then I talked about question 8, which is the election of charter commissions in a nonpartisan election. Question 9 is a limitation on the salaries of charter commissioners and the chair. What this proposal does is say that the commissioners shall set their salaries by ordinance, but the salaries cannot be greater than 50% of the...
Mary, if you can move that up, we don't have it up there yet. Let me point out, Sarah, as you're saying that, our real motion is those are to be announced, the percentages, if we go with percentages, but Sarah and I talked and said, let's just plug something in to show people what we're talking about. This may or may not be 50 and 75. We could have put TBA. It's just easier to see the way it is.
Right.
Thank you.
And so it's a certain percentage, or some other language for that matter, but here it's a certain percentage of the salaries of non-charter county commissioners. And this one also provides for an additional amount for the chair of the county charter commissioners. Question 10 is a term limit.
Yeah, actually, 9's your term limit. You just carried your...
Oh, okay. Oh, I switched them up?
Right,
Okay.
well-
Sorry about that. So question 9 is the term limits, two terms of 4 years each for the charter commissioners.
It actually reads 8 consecutive years, but it could be 2 terms depending on, except for
8
resignation.
consecutive years, right. You could sit out
Right.
for a term and then run again.
Mr. Brinkman, am I seeing you? Need to-
Yeah, thank you. Point of clarification, on number 10, where it says, as a percentage of the county commissioner in a non-charter county, as I understand it, the salaries vary with population of the non-charter counties, don't they?
They
And
do.
so we need to specify a county in order to have any certainty there.
Or of this population.
we could
right.
do
Right, so essentially what we're saying is what the salary would have been if we hadn't changed anything.
That's right.
Right.
Okay. Anybody down here wants to just wave your hand. We'll do the best we can. Sarah, please carry on.
That's it. That's number 10.
Okay. Again, those are just rough draft, but we wanted everybody to know that we're already, if we should go with what we've got, we're at 10 questions on the ballot. I think there's at least 6, maybe 7 constitutional amendments looking at the November ballot. And so I would advise the supervisor of elections is going to need a lot of ink. So the way things are going, we'll see what happens.
And the citizens will do a lot of study.
That's right. It's going to require a
16
diligent
questions
effort
is a
on
lot.
behalf of the citizens. Any comments by the commission here before I recognize any citizens that may just want to comment? And again, very rough draft. Mr. Brinkman?
Okay, I was going to say, I guess we're taking citizen comments on these, but I assume that we're going to get to some others, and I was thinking that we'd take citizen comment when we put items on the floor, but whatever the pleasure.
Let me just recognize anybody that might wish to speak very briefly, because we're going to move on to the other. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time tonight. Mr. Emmer, please.
I'm Phil Emmer, and I'd like to make 2 comments. The first one is about where people live. If anybody wants to run for a commission and they're not in the right district, they just move. Take a department in another district, so that eliminates that. That's happened many times in Florida. The second thing I'd like to comment on is I think I've known Professor Little for about 40 years, and he's never been as quiet as he is now, and he knows an awful lot about government. And I was wondering if he had any views that differ or would like to present them, because I think he could give a lot of information. Thank you.
We're always happy to recognize any member that wishes to speak.
Mr. Chair, can they say their names when they come up for the...
I'm sorry. I thought he did, but anyway. Yes, sir. Please, briefly. If you'll just call out your name, please.
Keith Azuri, local Alachua County resident. I got a couple questions, I guess. First, I seem to recall there being a discussion of, I think, what Mr. Emmer was just talking about with the, what was Mr. Emmer just talking about? I lost my train of thought.
Living in a district.
Excuse me?
Residency.
Yeah, what is the official law on that currently, and weren't we talking about changing that at some point? requiring you to live in the district longer?
I think right now you have to live there on the date you're sworn in, if I'm correct. Am I hearing? Right.
So I just thought when I heard the discussions of that earlier, I thought it would be good for that to be a little more strict of a requirement, which I'm not hearing of that here. And then how do we arrive at the conclusion that limiting how many districts can go to the county lines helps the rural areas? I'm just wondering, is there just the way the numbers are laid out on the map? And then my last question, and I'll walk away, is related to I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'll walk away.
I appreciate it, Mr. Rosari. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi, Allison Cox. I want to discuss the 5 versus the 7. I have a real concern if we start going to 7. One, just the financial burden of paying 2 more commissioners. Also, the discussion time. The debate that goes on now is already quite lengthy, and it's often difficult for the public to have the opportunity to speak and get in front of the commissioners. And I don't think that having 2 more people jump into the discussion is really going to add any value to what is being discussed. It's important that the commissioners are there in order to serve the public, and I have yet to hear of anybody having difficulty reaching one of the 5 commissioners right now. They are all readily available. They are all willing to meet with us. So the fact that if you are able to draw districts, which I'm confident this group can come up with 5 districts that represent the population pretty evenly, then those 5 commissioners will be able to provide great representation and serve their clients. And the fact if Gainesville gets concentrated into a smaller area, as a person that lives in the unincorporated area and the one that is most subjected to the decisions by the county commission, I don't have a problem with Gainesville being a little bit smaller in terms of emphasis or anything else and only having 1 district. Because I think too often now the city overrides the unincorporated area. So I am strongly in favor of only keeping, I guess, the 5 and not going to 7.
Let me just comment quickly. Just now recognize you, Bob. No matter how the district's drawn, they'll be drawn by the county commission once they're actually drawn. This group won't do that. But when they're drawn, no matter how you cut them, right now there's about 250,000 people in Alachua County, 125,000 in the city of Gainesville. Half of those districts will be in the Gainesville area. 2.5 are covered by that, or if there's 7, 3.5 have to include that center area. So, I mean, again, that would be up to that. But what this proposal is saying is that they're trying to make sure that not all of them include a large segment of Gainesville. Some would be the rural areas. I understand it. Bob, did you want to make a comment?
Well, just the issue, you can't put Gainesville in a single district because all the districts have to have equal population. And you can't just say that 125,000 people in Gainesville, we don't like how you vote, and so your votes aren't going to count very much. I mean,
No,
that's
and
basically
I
what you said.
understand.
We'll give each somebody in Gainesville half a vote.
No, but what I am saying is that realize the fact that a lot of the population is moving west of 34th Street, and the center of Gainesville is not really within the city boundary that we often think of as Gainesville. And as I said, I'm confident that a district can be drawn, that it would not require or allow all of the districts to be monopolized by the city of Gainesville.
There are lots of people that agree with you, but this was attempting to address specific citizen requests that we have a district or 2 that would have enough population to represent rural interests. And that's
what
why
I'm
it's
hoping.
been,
I agree with that.
and no one's voted on anything yet, so nobody knows that that'll pass anyway.
Let me recognize DJ. You wanted to speak first, and I'll come in. Oh, was he first? Okay, Professor Little.
May I inquire of the speaker? Are you recommending that the board not give the citizens an opportunity to vote for 7? Or are you making a speech against the people accepting 7 if it's presented to them?
My preference would be I don't think that we need to put 7 on there. And if you do put 7, I think you need to attach the price tag of what it's going to cost the citizens to support 7 commissioners. The
My
fact that there's going to be
question,
additional
my question
salary.
is, do you want us not to put it on the ballot?
I would prefer not to.
Okay, thank you.
Not to put the 7.
Right.
Right, okay. All right. Ms. Ferguson?
Mr. Chair, thanks. I'm not sure how the lines can be drawn without all of those districts having a piece of Gainesville in them, because Alachua is about 8,000 people. Archer is 1,000, High Springs 4, maybe about 5,000, La Crosse 195, Newberry about 5,000, Micanopy 637, Waldo 831, Hawthorne 1401, Gainesville, like the chair said, 125,000. You got to do the math. I don't see how it's going to happen personally. I don't see how, if this passes, that Gainesville still won't dominate all of those districts.
Well, what I have only seen is, and to answer your question, I've seen some preliminary drawings, and some of them basically took the area starting as close to the city district around the I-75 and going over towards Archer, and then there would be a huge district on the west side, there'd be a huge district on the east side, and then two smaller ones in the middle. Those were some preliminary drawings that I've seen floated around before. I have not gone back and researched it. As I said, I think it's something that, whether it's the commission, their staff, there are people that should be able to look at it. And I think that there is a frustration with the rural area and feeling like they're not getting represented. And so that's...
Let me go here now. Thank you very much, Ms. Cox. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Grundy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, there's two things that I really think, and I actually agree with Ms. Cox. There's a couple of things that we discussed last meeting. We are going to try to come up with an arithmetic or some kind of formula to balance out having an equilibrium of districts based on geography. And there's simply no rationale to that. I mean, you cannot create equity and equilibrium based on geography. We've tried it. I mean, it is not going to work. And I said the other thing is that we're going to have to gerrymander to these districts to get that equilibrium. And I just don't see the rationale based on what has been brought to this body thus far to create that equilibrium. Thus far, it would be an absolute disaster based on what we're seeing now. You cannot cut the city of Gainesville out. I mean, as much as we want to, I'm not advocating for or against, Mr. Chair. I'm simply saying, based on what has become before this body, based on so far, we are basing this off geography, simply geography. And that is not going to work because we cannot, in the spirit of one, the Constitution, state and federal law, ensure that we have that equity. And we said last time, Mr. Chair, this body said, well, we're not going to discuss that. But really, the citizens are coming before you and stating that, yes, we are. And we have to address this for what it is. We have to draw districts that are compact and contiguous. Those districts that were drawn did not meet that criteria. We have to draw districts that do not violate the Federal Voting Rights Act. We haven't done that. We have to draw districts that meet the threshold that don't violate. We have to ensure that. Mr. Chair, I absolutely agree with Ms. Cox. I think that this is going to be an absolute disaster. Based on we're trying to make a threshold simply on geography. So I'll return it back to the chairman.
Volunteer that we don't draw districts.
Appreciate it. Mr. Brinkman, then I know Mr. Martin wants to be recognized.
And I'll be very brief. It's a federal constitutional principle that there is one person, one vote. And all the people here who have gotten up and spoken to their frustration, which I understand, and the desire to favor, to bias the representation on the county commission towards rural areas, which are inherently lower population, is absolutely counter to the one person, one vote principle. And I assure you will draw a complaint to the United States Department of Justice, and all the comments by the people here on record will be preserved and will be used as evidence. You know, you can't do it.
Let me recognize Mr. Martin, then I'll come back to the thing. Then we're going to try to move on here because we got some other work here to do, I think.
Yeah. Thank you.
Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we're getting really emotional about some fairly simple issues. As someone who has pushed for this issue for quite some time, I personally think we're complicating it a great deal. If you look at the current county commission districts, there are 5 single, now I know they're voted countywide, but the districts as they currently are supposed to be based on population, are they not? They were. Okay. If you just took the 5 districts as they currently are and just said, okay, they all need to be single-member districts. In other words, you live in that district and the people in that district actually vote for that commissioner, that would resolve a lot of the problem. There's no one, let me finish, there's no one that I know of that seriously thinks that Gainesville can be taken out of the equation in any way, shape, or form. The only thing that people like, and I can speak for like in Hawthorne, and I've dealt with a lot of other small cities, their only issue they're trying to do is not to put someone from Waldo or Hawthorne or Micanopy on the county commission. The idea is that if you live in Archer right now, that your vote, I know it's one person, one vote, but you could literally win every district, every precinct in that district, and if you didn't carry the larger precincts throughout Gainesville, you would lose that election. So what I think people are trying to do is to say, we don't want to have a biased vote on there. What we want to do is have a real representation from that area, so that that person in Hawthorne, their vote doesn't count any more than a person in Gainesville or Archer or anywhere else, but it's not totally diluted by the overwhelming nature of the city of Gainesville. You've never heard me say that we should take the city of Gainesville out of the equation. That's not possible. But I do think there is a way of getting some type of single member district or combination that does allow for voters in rural areas to be not more say, but actually feel like in a way that they're impacting an election of a representative in that district. Because right now they don't.
Mr.
Thank you
Chair,
very much.
Mr.
Grundy.
I somewhat take exception to that, Mr. Martin, with this, and I'll tell you why. Because right now it's simple arithmetic. You're saying to the citizens that you want them to give up right now the ability to vote for 5 commissioners right now as it stands to vote for 1. And right now everyone has access to, and all the commissioners are accountable to every single citizen. And it's simple arithmetic. I don't see the logic in saying to the citizens of Alachua County that we want them to give up the right to vote for 5 commissioners. They have the right to vote for every single one and every single election. And and on the same token, we also, this body said that we want to have nonpartisan elections, which would make it even more inclusive, a more inclusive electorate. And now, if we give them the right to vote in nonpartisan elections, we're going to take that away for single member districts. I don't understand that logic.
Well, we would not be. First of all, we would not. He mentioned my name specifically, Mr. Chair.
All right.
We would. I'll say this, and I'll pass. We would not be taking the voters' rights away because only the voters could make this happen. So first of all, if anything what passes from this charter, whether I agree with it, you agree with it, or anybody else, if it passes from here and is duly voted on by the citizens of Alachua County, it is being passed by them. You're not taking anything away. I think what is happening is there are people who are afraid to put that on the ballot because they know it would pass.
Thank you for your comment. Let me recognize the
I'll be
citizen.
brief, Mr. Chairman. I know you're trying to move on with it. My name is Mark Goldstein, and I presume from the conversation today and Ms. Ferguson's enumeration of all the villages of Alachua County that Earlton will not become the county seat. I think that was the only one that was overlooked, and I feel terrible about it. East Earlton is a wonderful place, and we could serve you well if you move to one town, one vote, which I don't think you're going to do. Dearly beloved, I appreciate the public service that you're all giving, and I sense the passion, the intelligence, and the commitment that you have to make us a better county, and I thank you for it. It's going to take someone wiser than me and than the folks I know to divide things and bring them back together in a way that you'd like to. I do have one question, though, having made my entire speech about Earlton not becoming the county seat. I try to remember that, Ms.
Wood's family grew up out there and helped that. Evanston, I'm sorry.
Oh, Evanston, there's another
I'm sorry, I
overlooked.
apologize.
There it is, the long-forgotten towns, communities.
I'll simply say, after last night's Scenic Road meeting, that it is a very politically charged area.
Yes. Yes.
Earlton is, not Evanston. Okay.
We're hot.
Go ahead,
Anyway,
Mr. Goldstein.
it says somewhere in the document, and correct me, Mr. Chairman and friends, that you will endeavor, or as much as possible, distribute the population in districts that are equal. Is there, in law or in this document, a definition as much as possible? Because I learned the hard way the difference between shall and might, or shall and will, or my good intentions are, And I've learned that unless you say shall, and you're not going to get it down to one person, is there some kind of mathematical definition that's as much as possible? Now, I know Mayor Martin would think much as possible is a different number than I might come up with, although we've always come to a resolution of our differences.
I know that this will be addressed, and again,
there are some legal bases for this.
There are, and Mr. Grundy mentioned that one of the compact and contiguous areas, equal in population, not breaking up particular constituencies and so forth. Those are all out there. That's sort of beyond our charge because, as I've said before, if the voters should select a single-member district or a different commission than we have now, set up than we have now, the county commission and their attorney, it'll be their job then to make sure all that is
come to a resolution that would be put before the people. My only final observation is there is something compelling about Mr. Armando's continued concern over the gerrymander of districts, given that what we all know became of our senatorial district in this county over many years, which is a district that most folks can't run in except if you're like a sheriff or something like that and you know everybody or done a lot of favors. It is a concern I have, and I'm sure you all have, that in doing this, that the lines be such that we know where we are, because it's really hard sometimes to know what district I even run in, defeat, lose, whatever happens to me. So that's a concern that I think he brings up about our ability to envision a geography as to where folks are rather than what they, and that has to come out, I think, in the laundry before it gets to the public, so that we don't have the feeling that the past events, which have really disenfranchised many people from public offices and from participation, happen with this. I know that's certainly not the intention of this group, because you're all publicly spirited. Again, I appreciate the public service you're all contributing. I can see it's very real.
Appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
And my purpose in having Ms. Blakely sort of bring everybody up to date was so that you know where we are today. And so sort of those of you that haven't been able to be part of us so far, now you sort of know where we are. Now, we're going to continue to work on those items, but those are items that at least 8 members up here have said we're willing to consider and willing to continue to work with. So we need to start drawing this part of it to a conclusion, and we're not going to get to the rest of our work tonight. Let me recognize you and then any other members.
Rod Gonzalez again. I agree with you 100%. It's unfortunate that someone's comments made it appear that we didn't want people's votes to count. That's totally irrational, if you ask me. I think question number 1 that was addressed with the new districts by chance, it addresses all of the above. It takes care of Gainesville, the rural areas. That's why we're in favor of it. So we certainly want everyone's vote to count, for sure.
I think everybody in here wants everyone to have a voice in the choice, and I know, having spent a great portion of my professional life encouraging people to vote and to register and vote, that's certainly near and dear to my heart. Anyway, any further members want to comment on this section? Yes, sir, Mr. Wood.
I didn't attend the last meeting because of my pneumonia and all, but feeling better and thought about this a long time. There were 3 things that I really wanted to talk about, and I know John's issue is that it's difficult for people in the rural areas to get elected. At least you say so, but I don't believe that. Because I have seen lots of people from our small towns get elected to the commission time and time again. Your dad is a great example. My grandfather's a good example of having served on this commission and being able to be elected from outside. And I just, I don't hold that doing single-member districts is going to give people in the rural areas a better chance to get elected, because I think if a person is a good politician and people believe in him, they're going to get elected no matter where they live. The other thing that I'm kind of concerned about, and we keep going over this, and Armando used that word gerrymandering, which to me is a deep concern about what we may be doing here. No matter how those lines are drawn, it's going to be drawn by population. And we all know where the population is in this county. And if we elect single-member districts, the power is going to be over there and not in the east side of the county. And I've lived in the east side of the county all my life. whether it's been in Evanston or for a little while in Northeast Gainesville. And I really have seen so much of the resources being taken from the east side and being given to different parts of the northwest part because the growth is there. And I think that if you have people elected from single-member districts, they're going to create a new political dynamic that's going to draw a greater barrier between the haves and the have-nots, because the have-nots live in the east part of this county. And I really would like to just be a little more concerned about what that might do, because the entire political environment may be a whole lot different than what we're seeing now. And I think what these two gentlemen alluded to, I'm deeply concerned about too, and that's the right to vote. Maybe people want to vote to eliminate their right to vote, but right now, in 8 years, I can vote for 5 county commissioners, correct?
That's correct.
If we go to single-member districts, in 8 years, I can vote for 2, correct?
That's correct.
So what you're really doing is eliminating the right of people's vote. And I'm deeply concerned about that, too, because I don't know how many of you have never missed an election. Since I registered, I have never missed an election. And it's very important that I have that right to vote. And the same thing can be said about term limits. We've seen some commissioners who've served very, very well for 3 terms, 4 terms. And if you put 8-year limitations, then you're simply eliminating my right to elect somebody that I think is a good person, whether he or she is running for a 3rd term or 4th term. So I just like to get those things out in the air. I think those are worth thinking about before we go too far with this.
And since you missed the last meeting, we're happy you're feeling better and that you've offered your comments. Appreciate those. Mr. Grundy.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I want to reiterate on something else I forgot to mention, and I appreciate the sentiments, Mr. Wood. The thing that ultimately, nobody here wants to take away anyone's right to vote. Absolutely not. I mean, I know my father's history, what he talked about, what his right to vote was, how his mother and father had to fight for the right to vote. I mean, I understand what that's like. Nobody here. I heard the sentiment that was when I was out in the public that I was going to discriminate against rural voters simply because I don't live in a rural area, which is completely absurd. Completely. First and foremost, it was stated, Mr. Wood, last meeting, you weren't necessarily here, but that if you don't live in the rural areas, when was the last time we had a commissioner elected from the rural area? I can name 2 right off the top of my hand. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter where you live. Right now, you can live anywhere and still be elected. We don't want to take anyone's right to vote. And I feel like right now, I think the sentiment out there is that rural voters, which is 41% of our county, feel like they don't have a voice. We want you to have a voice, but we don't want to take away your right to vote for 5 commissioners to vote for 1. There's no logic in it, and that's what we're talking about tonight. And we can't draw boundaries that are equitable. We just can't. Unless state law is changed, that's where we're guiding. That's our guiding light, is right there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your comments. Any further before we wrap up this portion here?
I'd like to inquire of the last 2 speakers, are they speaking to make no proposals? Is that what I'm hearing that these 2 speakers are proposing? Not you, the ones on the chair, on the dais here. I just wonder, is the argument we shouldn't put anything on the ballot?
To me, the argument is to not go to single-member districts because I'm deeply concerned by what I suppose it could end up in gerrymandering, and also by the inability of representation by the east side of the county.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just want to know, are you saying to us, don't put it on the ballot?
I will say that if it goes forward, I'll vote against it.
Okay.
And,
Thank you.
And I guess you're asking me that, Commissioner Little, as well?
Yes.
I guess it's clear as stand. The way it's worded right now, I absolutely cannot support it, the way it's worded right now.
Thank you.
We appreciate all those comments, and y'all thought health care was difficult. Let me just say that right now.
That's not a good
We're
idea.
glad we don't have to deal with those problems. I think that's for sure. Okay. Ms. Blakely, any further comments before we move on? We're okay? All right. Well, now everybody should be up to date. That's where the commission is at this point in time, and whether or not any of those items will make the ballot is yet to be determined, and whether or not, if they make the ballot, the voters still get the last say. The voter's always in charge. At this time, then we'll go back to our consideration of proposals, just as we did at our last meeting, and we'll open the floor for anyone that would like to place a motion on the floor. The general motion that we look for is to refer to the attorney, whatever proposal it may be, to prepare an amendment in ballot language and bring it back for our consideration. Are there any proposals anyone would wish to make today? Mr. Glazer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since it seems like there are a couple proposals that are contradictory, I think it would be a good idea to move forward and try to separate those. So my motion is for us to move forward questions 5, 7, excuse me, let me go back, please. To move forward question 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I thought we were opening the floor to new submissions, not to moving already moved forward proposals forward. Again, I don't even think we're entertaining that at this meeting, are we?
Yeah, let me agree with his point. At this time, Mitch, what we're going to do is take additional. These are going to all come back to us.
That's fair enough.
And
we just have a conflict of a couple of
Right.
them.
I agree.
thought we could maybe give a better direction so our next meeting we can get to it. But that's I understood, and we'll move forward.
Okay,
Fair enough.
We'll recognize the point. Did you have something?
No, if he conceded that point.
Okay, all right, very good. But we're going to take all those back up again. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I would like to move that we vote on the proposal that came from the cities, unanimously passed by all the cities of Alachua County for the, I believe it's called the County City Referendum Required to Impose Requirement on Municipality. I believe is the title to it.
It's been moved and seconded that we, let me see which number that is, somebody can help me with that. But anyway, this is the, regarding the Home Rule Charter amendments, that any other provision of the county charter notwithstanding any amendment to this charter proposed by petition, the Charter Review Commission, or the Board of County Commissioners, that in whole or in part transfers or limits service, function, power, or authority of a municipality, shall be effective within or in regard to a municipality only if the amendment is approved by a majority of the voters in Alachua County voting in a referendum, and also approved by a majority of the voters voting in a referendum in that municipality. So it's got the bifurcated ballot where each portion would have to vote yes in order for that part of that to be effective in the city, in a city. All right. Did I understand you?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, so I made the motion.
We'll recognize you to speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Essentially, this motion, this type of charter amendment has been done in, I believe, in Palm Beach County was one of the places it was done. It was passed unanimously by, when I say passed, I mean passed as recommending that this board approve it by all the cities in Alachua County, including Gainesville, by the way. So we're not excluding Gainesville by any stretch. And essentially what this does is it says in layman's terms, I'm sure there's some more legalese terms, but it essentially says that if you're passing a charter amendment that affects one particular municipality, that charter amendment has to not only be passed by the county as a whole, but the majority of citizens in that community.
To be effective
to be effective in that community. It would still be effective in the unincorporated areas. And as I say, it's been it's the one issue I'm sure of that has been actually endorsed by every city. And I think the votes were unanimous. I could not swear to that, but I know every city has passed it. I know we have some representatives of the local league, the Mayor Davis, who is the president of the local league, and he would certainly correct me if I'm wrong at any point. But I feel like if we're talking about listening to the citizens, there is nothing more grassroots, in my opinion, than the municipalities, be it the city as large as Gainesville or as small as La Crosse. It doesn't get any more grassroots than that. So I would encourage this board to take that into consideration when they decide which way they're going to vote for this, because it literally is representing, we talked at length about the city of Gainesville on this districting deal. and by them voting for it, and by every municipality voting for it, it literally is representing the vast majority of the citizens of Alachua County. Their representatives have voted to ask us to pass this. So to me, that should carry a lot of weight, and I would urge my members to pass this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Would anybody like to speak in opposition to the
Yes.
Mr. Brinkman?
Well, as I recall from the attorney's backup from a previous meeting, we essentially already have that requirement in state law. In other words, that the county cannot pass ordinances which apply inside a municipality without the majority of the members within that municipality approving it, with the exception that under our charter, back in 2000, the electorate approved by a 70.5% margin. And I say again, I don't think anything has ever passed by a higher vote margin in a county-wide election. A provision in the charter which allows the county to impose air and water regulations that are stricter than state standards within the municipalities. To me, this proposal conflicts with the already existing charter. And, you know, if the city of Gainesville is only 50% of the population and it got 70% of the vote, even if you presume that every single voter in Gainesville voted for it, that still means that a significant portion of the rural voters voted for it. I would submit that 70% shows that the people wanted the county to have the authority to regulate air and water in all the municipalities because, frankly, pollution does not obey political boundaries. And what happens in one area of the county affects other areas of the county also.
Mr. Chair?
You wish to speak in favor of the motion?
Actually, no.
Okay, I'll come right to
well,
you.
It's more of a question
Okay.
to making a motion.
Please, okay.
Addressing Mr. Brakeman's concern, does the proposal exempt environmental concerns?
It doesn't rescind anything that's already been voted on.
No, does it exempt that, as in that going forward, would environmental, I guess, ordinances, or what would that have to be voted on by the majority of that community?
Well, I don't want to get, in all fairness, I played a lawyer on TV once, as they say, but I don't want to give a legal opinion on that. I think it's a valid question. So if we could get our counsel to talk about that, or Mr. Little, I'd prefer that that's kind of a legal question, so I'd prefer to hear from counsel. My intention is not to, I agree with what Mr. Brinkman said in a sense that if the citizens voted for that, then it's the law of the land. Just like I would say that anything they vote for, I guess what I would say as a general comment at this time, that I think we need to, on all these issues, we need to trust our citizens to vote for what they think is right as well. So I do, and I've been voted in and out, so I trust them in a lot of different ways that some others might not. But I don't know the specific answer to your question.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let me recognize Mr. Ackerman. He might be able to shed some light on this.
Let me just read for a minute. This is Section 1.4 of Article 1 of the Alachua County Home Rule Charter, and it's titled Relation to Municipal Ordinances. Municipal ordinances shall prevail over county ordinance to the extent of any conflict, notwithstanding the foregoing, if the county and a municipality enact ordinances establishing different standards for the purpose of protecting the environment by prohibiting or regulating air or water pollution, the ordinances imposing more stringent standards shall prevail to the extent of the difference and be fully enforceable within the boundaries of such municipality. However, the ordinances imposing less stringent standards shall not be deemed to conflict with ordinances imposing more stringent standards, and shall also be fully enforceable within the boundaries of such municipality. I mean, it appears that that's exactly what you want us to vote on. It's
already got
in the
it.
charter.
Right. But it's talking about a specific issue as opposed to others. There may be.
It's not. Municipal
About
ordinances.
the regulation, it's Charter 1.
Yeah,
But
municipal ordinances.
This is not an attempt to repeal Charter 1 by any stretch.
I understand, but you want municipal ordinances to prevail and they already prevail. You're trying to put something on the ballot for something that's already in the charter.
I disagree.
Okay. Let's keep some things. Let me recognize some other.
Actually, I'm going to follow in the spirit. I actually have a question too, and it's a theory, I guess. If I'm understanding what you're proposing, Commissioner Martin, is in essence, this is more of a theory. If, let's say, the county passes a tax-wide, a county-wide tax, based on your proposal right now, in theory, that tax could, a municipality could say, okay, the county passed it, but in theory we don't accept it. So basically, everybody else can reap the benefits or has to pay the tax, but the municipality, in essence. So you can opt out. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, it has nothing to do with taxation. The one thing I would say to address Mr. Ackerman's question, it doesn't have anything to do with taxation. But, keep in mind, as I said before, the city of Gainesville was the one, I believe, that proposed this to come before us. So it has been vetted by their attorneys and their commission, and they supported this. So it's not, the only reason I'm mentioning that is I know that I tend to get labeled, and probably rightfully so, as speaking a lot for the small cities, and that's mainly because they don't have as many drum beaters as the bigger cities, and I beat the drum. But I just want to remind a lot of people on this that the City Commission of Gainesville passed this, okay, and is asking for this as well. It's not generated by the small cities.
Thank you very much.
There are some issues that they're trying to address. I think that the biggest issue would probably come to land use, to be honest with you. Those types of issues, land use issues.
Thank you. I had Ms. Ferguson and Ms. Little, and then come back to you. Ms.
The
Ferguson.
county absolutely has land use authorities.
Not
All right.
municipality.
I've recognized Ms. Ferguson. Now let's
They
let her.
absolutely do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I am speaking against the motion because I believe that it's already in the charter, and I know that's an interpretation, but I think our attorney has already said the same, and that's why we have our attorney to kind of advise us. But even if she hadn't, when I read it, that's what I read. And I'm not exactly sure what, and I understand we had all the cities represented at our last meeting supporting their resolutions, and I still do not understand their concern. It's still, I guess I'm missing the point or whatever, because I think that what they're wanting is in the charter now.
Thank you. Professor Lewis, you have your hand up. Then I'll come to you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I speak against the motion. You may remember the last meeting, we spent half the meeting on this subject. Yes. And I think we showed then that the proponents really didn't know what it was about and why they were doing it and where it came from. It came from we found out, I think, the Florida League of Cities, not from the city of Gainesville. And indeed, the city of Gainesville, I think the records will show, approved it just like every other city did. Somebody stuck it under the nose and they said, what's wrong with this? I have talked to the city attorney about this, and I'm not going to reveal my conversation with him, but I don't think you're going to find him come tell us it's the thing that needs to be done. The thing is simply unconstitutional, as our lawyer told us last week. We've got this covered in the Florida Constitution, Article 1, Section 1H, I think, and Article 8, Section 4 covers this. We can't change the Constitution. That's what they're asking us to do. So I think we ought to defeat this and go on about our business. Otherwise, we're going to spend a lot of time on something that surely is never going to go anywhere.
If I would, Mr. Chair, we did agree at the last meeting to defer this to the next meeting. That's all I'm trying to do, Mr. Look.
Mr. Ackerman.
Well, I would just add that the Section 1.5, Article 1, which is immediately following the article, is each municipality shall be responsible for land use planning within its respective boundaries. That's already in the charter. That's already a power of the city. I guess my issue is if you will tell me what your proposal does that's different than this, you might get some support, but I don't think there's anything your proposal's doing that isn't already here.
Any other members before I recognize some citizens?
Mr. Chair, it sounds like Commissioner Little. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you didn't recognize me.
I'm recognizing you now.
Mr. Chair, I think basically for maybe Mr. Martin's sake, I'm willing to second it so we can give it an up or down vote.
It's already been seconded.
So I think we should just have an up or down vote and move on with life.
We want to recognize the citizens before we do that, unless somebody should move the previous question that gets 2/3 vote. But other than that, any other commissioners here? If not, I see the president of the League of Cities leaning forward, Mr. Louis Davis. If you'll come up and introduce yourself to us and say what you'd like to say. We plowed a lot of this ground last week, as Mr. Little said, and so we don't need everybody to speak tonight, but we certainly recognize you and anybody that you think would be appropriate to speak to us.
And I thank you for listening to me. I'm Louis Davis, the Mayor of Waldo, the President of Alachua County League of Cities. Please bear with me. My morning, like Mr. York, started about 5:30 this morning in Tallahassee and made it back here tonight for this meeting. But as the President of the local league, I wanted to take this opportunity to address you and propose home rule dual vote. In your agenda, you have a packet from a letter from Attorney John Hubbard, who agrees with Ms. Blakely that there is no case law that directly addresses this subject. He goes on to express his opinion different than hers. He believes that where the courts have yet to rule on it, it is appropriate to allow the people to express their will. He further believes that the future court rulings would give great weight to the will of the people as expressed in a vote. We ask you to err on the side of the people of Alachua County and allow the vote on this matter. I'm also remind you that this is not an unusual request. The voters of Pinellas County had home rule for about 10 years. About 2 years ago, Palm Beach adopted the same provisions with the majority of 74% vote. We just want the Alachua County voters, to have the same opportunity as the rest of the state does. We should remember that home rule is important to our citizens, that it has been a priority for Alachua County cities for a long time. This idea is not to cause trouble, but to right a particular wrong. It is to strengthen municipal home rule, our voters' right to shape the cities they live in. We believe that local decisions should be made locally, and that's why we're requesting this now. And it's not for ordinances, but future charter amendments. Lastly, I'd like to express our appreciation to the city of Alachua County. We're pleased that the CRC has taken time to visit each city and ask about issues. We asked the community for ideas and told what we wanted. Every single city, passed a resolution, as Mr. Martin has said. And I believe all of them were unanimous, so I can't say that for sure, but I believe they were. And it goes to the local elected officials. They're the ones that see everybody from day to day at the grocery stores, at church, at the coffee shops. We're the one that hear what they want. So we're asking you to put this on the vote on the November ballot. We're not asking you to pass it. We're just asking you to give the citizens the right to voice their opinion. And if they say no, so be it. And if they say yes, so be it. And if it's challenged in court to determine whether it's legal or not, that's up for the courts. And like Mr. Little said, the League of Cities has been strong behind us, but that's what they're there for. That's the reason we're members of the League of Cities. And thanks to them, we get a lot accomplished.
Thank you for your comment.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Mr. Davis, would you handle the question, please?
So, Mr. Davis, as I understand our charter, it already gives home rule to all the municipalities except in the areas of air and water regulation. So, does the League of Cities wish to repeal that home rule charter, the Charter Amendment 1 in 2000, which gave the county that authority?
For the air and water?
Right.
I would say no myself on air and water, or pollution like that.
Okay.
But we're talking about maybe growth management, other things like that.
But that already exists.
I understand what you're saying, but I said future amendments.
Well, I think there's an issue with one charter amendment denying the ability for future charter amendments to do something. Perhaps an attorney who knows more about it than
I think, though, when there's something about pollution comes up, the people's probably going to speak very loudly on that.
I just don't know that you can constrain the electorate of the county in the future from being able to vote on something because of a previous vote of the electorate. And I'd be willing to hear from either Professor Little or Attorney Blakely.
It could happen tonight.
We'll see.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Davis, we appreciate it. Mayor Davis, we appreciate your extra effort to be here tonight. It's a long trip. Yes, sir. Please come forward, if you will, and introduce yourself to us.
Hi, Richard Shutterly, Mayor of Micanopy. And actually, this is for future charter amendments. That's what the home rule is about. It's also it's about it's about Alachua County. They're charter county. You have home rule against or within the state of Florida. That's very important for Alachua County. Micanopy looks at this as home rule for Micanopy. And we voted unanimously on our council. And we had multiple open meetings. We had citizens from our town who came and spoke. They want a right to have the voice that you've talked about throughout this meeting earlier. As far as constitutionality, honestly, I think that your choice number one up there before, I think I heard at the last meeting, was not constitutional. So, we not worry about that one. It is really for the courts to decide later whether it fits it or doesn't fit it. We're asking you to put this on the ballot to allow the citizens to vote for it. To me, the most important government that there is to deal with is our local government. And for the citizens down in Micanopy, that's Micanopy. We want to be able to decide what happens within our county and make that decision on future charter amendments that may come up that may conflict with Micanopy. Maybe they'll be good for Alachua, High Springs. Maybe they won't be good for Gainesville. The fact is, we want the ability to opt out of something that may not suit the nature and the environment that an individual town like ours has. And we don't want you to decide to just can this thing and take away our right for our own self-determination. It is real important to us that you at least put this on the ballot. Let the citizens of this county choose whether they want to allow the municipalities to have the option to opt out of other charter amendments. Why should you take that away from the overwhelming number of people that have been for this? That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much for your comments. Further comments and citizens? Did I see a hand? Somebody's hand? No hand. Mr. Wood.
I certainly went to 2 of these town meetings, and that's exactly what we heard. We
You
want
pull the mic closer to you there. So
but I can't determine what this would look like if it appeared on the ballot. So I guess, what is it that what is the language, if this appeared on the ballot, what is the language for this, and how would it vary from what's already in the charter?
The language, if you'd like me to answer your question,
Yes.
The language we were provided says, shall the Alachua County Charter be amended to require that charter amendments that transfer or limit municipal service, function, power, or authority take effect within the regard to a municipality only if the amendment is approved by a majority of Alachua County voters and also approved by a majority of the voters in the municipality. Now, that is not our attorney's wording. That's what we were provided by the cities. And but that's
Which is too long to appear on the ballot.
They've got it at 55 words is what they've written down here, so I don't know.
It is long enough.
Yeah. But I know we have a representative of the League of Cities here, Beth Rawlings, and she seems to be leaning forward in her chair. Beth, did you want to add anything before we leave this subject here tonight? She drove all the way up here from St. Petersburg, I think, so glad to have you. Just say your name for the record.
My name is Beth Rollins. And perhaps some of this confusion is my fault. We have maybe not been perfectly clear with the members of the commission about what this charter amendment would do. This charter amendment seeks to protect cities' regulatory authority from being usurped by future charter amendments that would be voted on strictly countywide. So in other words, if the county were to adopt a sign ordinance, for instance, that went contrary to the way that Micanopy wanted their city to look, the voters of Micanopy would be allowed under this provision to reject that sign ordinance.
power and function is already listed in the Constitution. Regulatory authority, as was pointed out in the legal arguments back and forth, is not so clearly defined, nor is it protected. So this is an attempt to protect the regulations of the cities from forcible amendment by a future county charter amendment. There are many things that could, in fact, take place here. I think I listed for you last month annexation as an option and the rules governing that. Some others might be things like consolidation of fire or public safety services against the will of a small town. How many firefighters have to be on a truck? Those are the kinds of things we're talking about. To clarify, what is already in your charter remains exactly as it is in your charter. Your environmental regulations that have already been passed by a majority of the county are absolutely still applicable and stay in your charter. In fact, given that we've heard that cities already have this municipal ordinances prevail argument, the environmental protections that the county voters voted on and placed in the charter usurped that same charter provision that allows municipal ordinances to prevail. Your county voters, by charter amendment, said, we feel strongly about this, and cities, you're no longer allowed to have this particular level of regulation. So what we're talking about is exactly the same thing. You would still keep your environmental protections, but for future regulatory decisions, the decision would need to be made by both the voters countywide and also by the voters inside the municipality. It's simple.
Thank you for your comments. Any member wish to comment?
I just have one comment.
I was sorry, finger here. Ms. Ferguson.
One word of caution to this body. Eventually, we're going to have to pare down, the number of issues that that we may move forward. And already, if I remember correctly, there are at least, I think, a half dozen that's going to be on the November election. And the more issues we place on the ballot, the less likely the voters are, to read and vote, I think. And I just think that we just need to kind of be careful in terms of the number of issues that we may move forward.
Thank you for your comments. I think Mr. Martin and then Mr. Little.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the only reason I'm speaking is because I was specifically challenged, so I feel like I need to address that. I wanted to give others a chance to speak. I'm hesitant. I don't want this to sound like a criticism of Charter 1 because I don't really have an issue with it. I did have some issues at the time, which is how it was done, but the overall thrust of what they're attempting to do and doing, I don't have an issue with. I would caution members to think that it's easy to be in favor of some issue and protection if it's something you agree with. In this case, as the former speaker said, the Charter 1 was passed, and it took away the exact authority that was said that city ordinances prevailed. And in this case, it was a very popular decision amongst, I'm sure, some people here, probably the majority of the people here. And it took that power away. So to say that that couldn't be done in the future, what this also does is protect you from things you may not agree with. In this case, I know there's been some people, I don't want to personalize it, but there's been people who voiced strong opinions about Charter 1, and I respect you for that. But what if that Charter 1 had been something you were adamantly opposed to? And the majority of the citizens in the community you live had been adamantly opposed to it. It still would have passed. There is no guarantee that that cannot happen in the future for something radically different. You could come up and I'm just using one example. You could have, because, as been stated before, the actual corporate limits of the city of Gainesville are not the majority population of the county. The majority population of the county actually lives outside the corporate, including all the municipalities and all the unincorporated area. I believe I'm correct, am I not? It's growing faster, let's put it that way. My point being, here's one example. There was a case here recently where the MTPO, the city of Gainesville, was pretty much unanimously, not totally, but in favor of two-laning Main Street, which is a state highway. and part of it is a county highway, part of that road. You could have a charter amendment that says, for instance, there will be no downsizing of any 4-lane roads to 2 lanes in the county. No county road shall be reduced from 4-lane to 2-lane. If that had been proposed and passed, then the action of 2-laning Main Street would not have happened because it would have passed. But in this case, if someone had proposed that amendment that said that you could not reduce road capacity, the city of Gainesville could have voted and said that in their instance they want to have the capacity to still decide that. And if the rest of the county had voted that you could not reduce capacity, Gainesville still could have downsized Main Street to 2 lanes. I think that's an excellent example of what we're talking about here. It's dangerous to think of only the things that you support. You have to look at other scenarios, and what the cities are asking for is to protect themselves from future county commissions. There is no telling what people may vote for. Our county is dividing radically now. If you look at Volusia County, they have the beaches and they have the rural. It's almost like 2 separate counties. And if you look at Alachua County, we are fastly becoming that. There's been talk about the east side of the county tonight. I would maintain that if we keep growing like we're growing, the vast majority of citizens are going to live in the western part of the county, which they already do, and will be able then to turn around and vote for things that will impose things on the eastern side of the county that may have no interest in whatsoever. So just be careful that you're not getting so sold on one particular issue, the environment in this case. There are other issues that could come out. And so to answer your question, Mr. Ackerman, there are examples where, and Charter 1 is an example of where the charter was amended and it affected every city in Alachua County. There could be another charter amendment that you are diametrically opposed to that could do the same thing. In this case, it's popular because it's the environment. It may not be on another issue. That's what the cities are asking for, is the ability to prevent that in the future.
Thank you.
That's it.
Mr. Little was next.
Mr. Chairman, first I'd simply like to say that Charter 1 was adopted pursuant to the Florida Constitution.
I'm not
Period. Okay, well, let me talk. You want people to talk. The second thing I want to say is I'm all in favor of municipal home rule. The content of what they're asking for, I'm in favor of. I deem myself to be an environmentalist, but I'm not even sure I voted for Charter 1 because of my great concern about protecting the interest of municipalities. All that being said, what you're proposing is unconstitutional. Now we've had some clarification. They want us to put in our charter that an amendment to the charter can't be adopted unless it's approved both by the voters in the county and the voters in the cities. That's, I think, what we heard just a moment ago. Have I got that close to right? Okay. No, okay. That's what she said she wants us to do. I'd like to read you Article 8, Section 1C of the Florida Constitution. Quote, pursuant to general or special law, a county charter may be a county government may be established by charter, which shall be adopted, amended, or repealed only upon vote of the electors of the county. That's it, folks. This is the Florida Constitution. It was adopted by all of the people of Florida, you see, and it controls us. And that my argument is we're talking about something we don't have the power to do, so let's move on and vote against this thing.
Mr. Chair, can I call a question?
You'd like to make that motion? Let's see if we got anybody else wish to speak first real fast. Okay, I think we're there all right. All right, well, in that case, we'll place the question before us. I would, as we call the vote, let me just say to the citizens that from time to time, several of the members have expressed the desire that their vote at this stage, at first reading, should not be taken or placed in granite, so to speak. Some people want to think about it a little bit more. Some people want to, see what happens down the road a little bit. But those that vote for this may later vote against this, and those that vote against this today, if it should pass, may vote for it later. And so that's sort of how this commission's working so far. So with that, we need 8 votes to move it on. So those in favor of the motion, I would ask to raise your hand at this time. Those in favor? 1, 2, 3. Those opposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, the motion then fails, and so that is no longer before us. All right, are there any other motions that any member might wish to put before us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, before we run out of time.
Please, Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to sort of change the subject a little bit by asking this commission to consider moving forward the proposal to elect school superintendent. And I want to preface this by saying that I always think about the issues that we have before us in a bifurcated manner. One, is it lawful? 2, is it a good idea? And what I'm simply suggesting is that what we do tonight is send this proposal on to our attorney to see if it's lawful. And I can tell you right now, there's as we've heard, there's a constituency out here for every issue that we have here. And while they may not be fully represented here this evening, there are a number of individuals who are very concerned about the school system here. And what I'm very interested in seeing if it would be lawful to have such a proposal placed in the charter for consideration by the electorate.
So that's your motion. It's been moved and seconded, and then that we send to the attorney a proposal to make the school superintendent elected rather than appointed by the school board. Comments by the members?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask the maker of the motion exactly what is the issue in terms of the appointed superintendent process.
I think the issue comes down to one very simple thing, a perception of a greater need for accountability, such as what we heard in other proposals here tonight, that the present system is not as accountable to the electorate as it should be.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Little.
Mr. Chairman, the school superintendent is not a member of the charter government or the government of Alachua County. Schools are controlled by Article 9 of the Florida Constitution, and it's primarily a state function that's performed at the local level by school districts that are governed by the state, whatever it is, Department of Education that we have now, and the legislature. So this is not a functionary of the Florida government. Take a look at Article 8, Section 1 of the Constitution you have, and you see that we've got the Board of County Commissioners, and we've got the 5, we refer to them as the 5 constitutional officers. School superintendent is not there. It's a 9. So, again, this is it's a diversion from our time because whatever we do is going to mean nothing in terms of the charter. So I suggest we vote no on this.
Before I recognize the maker again, go ahead. Okay. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay. I, too, have looked at Article 9, and it does seem to me that this type of proposal can come forward in 2 ways. The school board can place such a proposal before the electorate, or a simple referendum of the electorate can be placed in whatever normal procedures that usually takes place. And in spirit or in function, that's what this body does. This body takes proposal and puts it on the ballot for the electorate to consider. And that's what I'm asking this body to do. I don't think it's anything outside of what the Constitution would allow. And more importantly, I think that's why we have the attorney here, to at least thoroughly vet that, so that we can see, 1, is it lawful, and 2, is it a good idea? I think that we spend a lot of time deferring our collective responsibility without actually getting full information on this. I think it's all our responsibility to vet all these issues thoroughly and consider all these issues thoroughly.
Okay. Further?
I have a question. I don't know if there's anyone here that can answer this, but it was either the late 60s or the early 70s that we changed from an elected superintendent to an appointed superintendent. And I can't remember if the school board did that or if we had a vote.
We had a vote, but I
It
thought
was-
the school board placed it on the ballot.
Exactly. So I think, that you have to start somewhere, and I think that's the place to start.
Well, you can do either way. I think the Constitution allows you to do either method.
Either by citizen petition, you're saying, or by
School board.
Mr. Grundy.
I think I understand what Commissioner Martin is actually proposing here, because a petition didn't start to increase our taxes last year for a 1 penny sales tax. Last year it was brought before us, and obviously not the same scenario, but I think I understand what we're talking about. Obviously, we should send it to the electorate to, obviously, the disarray that our schools are in, the graduation rates amongst individuals, period. I think we're asking for greater accountability for a leader. Right now, the superintendent, I guess, Mr. Martin is asking whether, if we have an appointed person, we don't have any real input to that person or their position. If we have somebody elected, they're accountable to the citizens of Alachua County. And I think that's a good thing. And I think we should put this on the ballot.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak? And again, I urge the board here, I understand people have got constituents, apparently, on the board that need to respond to, but we don't do the public of our county any service when we do something that we plainly have no authority to do. That's not a good thing for us to do. I'd like to read to you from the Florida Constitution, Article 9, Section 5, Superintendent of Schools, on page 846 of your Constitution that you all have. When provided by resolution of the district school board, which we are not, or by special law, and I'll put in parentheses, meaning something enacted by the Florida legislature, approved by the vote of the electors, the district school superintendent and any school district shall be employed by the district board as provided by general law. That's how we got the appointment. The next sentence is, the resolution or special law may be rescinded or repealed by either procedure after 4 years. So the Constitution tells us how to do it. We do it by resolution of the district school board, or we do it by special law approved by the voters of the electorate. And we're not either one of those. So I don't think we should be spending our time dealing with this matter.
And just
Thank you for your clarification there.
Mr. If I can just, I know we don't want to keep going back and forth. I think a lot of that definition or what you read there may turn on what the definition of special law is. And I'm not a constitutional law scholar, but special law could also mean of special application to a particular jurisdiction, not necessarily special law as enacted by the legislature. And I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that.
Let me
but
call
I'm-
on Ms. Blakely then to clarify this for us a little bit before you
yeah,
send to Mrs.
that might be
Gunn.
that might be better. And this is exactly what we're asking for.
A special law is a law enacted by the legislature that focuses in on and affects one jurisdiction. In this case, you're talking about the county, and it would have to, under that Constitution provision that Professor Little just read, it would have to be enacted by the legislature by special law.
And then be voted on by the
Voters of the county.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that clarification. Further comments? Hearing none, any citizen wish to bring forth on this question? Either podium is fine there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ed Jennings, for the record, I stand here as co-chair of the African American Accountability Alliance in raising this issue. I, having sat in the classroom with Professor Little, I am so humbled to even be in this, to speak on the issue. What I would like, and maybe for the edification of the listening public, would want to make sure I understand, is there a limitation on what the Charter Review Commission can place on the ballot? And I say that normally what would happen is the body, being the county commission, or the body being the school board, has the ability to put whatever they want to on it by either a majority or supermajority, whatever the state statute says. And the citizens have the ability by petition method to put something on the ballot by whatever the percentage is. Every 10 years, we get this opportunity to have a group of citizens to put things on the ballot. I don't know, again, I yield to both of many of the attorneys in this room, is there any limitation on your ability to put things on the ballot? What authority, as it speaks to charter review commissions that impact the county? Do you have that authority? I was a little boy when this happened before in regard to, I believe, Superintendent Talbot was the last of.
Tiny Talbot, right.
I said Superintendent
Tiny
Talbot.
That's right.
Was the last of, and I wasn't going to use that maybe pejorative term.
No, that's his name. Tiny Talbot.
He wouldn't mind, I guess. That was the last person, and then there was a change made. What I think I hear you saying is that in regard to this case, that the only way it can be changed is if the legislature acts and creates a vehicle like they've done. Orlando, Orange County just went through this process, or in the process now of electing a superintendent.
Or the school board, or the school board's.
Or the school board can make the call. What I don't know is, because you all meet every 10 years, do you all have that authority? And I think that what the citizens are, or at least some group of the citizens are looking for, to have the conversation to figure out if this is a viable means. We're not here today talking about, at least I'm not here today, talking about the accountability or lack of accountability of the position from that perspective. One, we want to know what's possible. Can this be? Is that an option? Is it an option for you as a charter review committee to put it on the ballot for that opportunity to happen? That's something that we want to explore. There's a whole bunch of issues going on with the school district that we can talk about in a different forum, because this is not the forum for that. But the issue is do you have the authority to do this or not? I hear Professor Little saying you don't have the authority to do that, but it's one thing for something to be a waste of time. It's another thing to say we don't have the authority. And I hope that you can distinguish between you all decide not to, you get to decide that by majority rule at any particular time. But it's another thing to say you don't have the authority to put it on the ballot. And that's when I'm trying to make sure that under your separate authority as a charter review commission, you're saying, or
right.
I'm hearing that you believe that that's not possible. So you can help me with that.
Certain 4As have put this to the school board also. Am I correct in that?
I don't know that there are multiple issues going on. I don't think we've addressed the issue to the school board itself.
Okay.
The issue
I didn't know if y'all had multiple fronts or not.
No, I don't think this issue has been brought to the school board as of yet. The issue was this forum was created, and again created every 10 years, and one is that possible? So I don't know. Is there some limitation on what you all can put on the ballot? Do you have that authority? And that's what we wanted to have explored.
You want to comment on it? Basically, I'll let her comment, but please, yes, I was going to, but I think you can do better.
Modesty.
There are many limitations on what this body has the power to do, and they're embodied in the Florida Constitution and in some statutes. On this particular issue, the Charter Review Commission has no authority over the school board or the superintendent. It is up to, as the Constitution says, the school board can propose this and the voters can approve it, or the legislature by special act can propose it and the voters can approve it. But this body has no authority over that issue.
So it is also, in your opinion, that then the citizens by petition couldn't put that on the ballot either, because without a special law empowering them to do that, that under the existing set of laws, the citizens couldn't put by petition method either, bring it to the ballot as many other things.
Board, though.
No, I'm just asking the question. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So it's either get your legislative delegation to push an issue in Tallahassee, or get 3 or 5 people on the school board to do it. Other than that, the citizens of Alachua County couldn't by the traditional method of passing a tax or passing a myriad of issues, can't avail themselves of that opportunity.
That is correct, because the electorate is also bound by this Constitution, and this Constitution says you can get a vote on that issue in either of 2 ways, and only those 2 ways, by the school board or by the legislature through special act. I mean, you certainly can circulate petitions to let the school board know or circulate petitions and let the legislature know what you want, but they have no, they don't have to act if they don't want to. But, you know, that's political process. But this body has no authority to do that, and the citizens as a body can't put it on the ballot by themselves.
Okay, well, thank you all for your comments. Thank you very much. Any further comments on this question? Mr. Wood?
I'd just say, after hearing all this, could we call a question to this and move on?
Let's see if does anybody else want to comment for? If not, I think we're ready to go then. Okay, in case we'll put the question to you, shall we send this item regarding the appointment of a school board superintendent to the attorney for further development? Those in favor of the motion say, or raise your hand, please. Those in favor?
For the spirit of doing it, I'm going to have to go ahead and say
I understand.
yeah.
I understand. We have two in favor. Those opposed, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Mayor Rush. 2 against. Motion fails to go forward. Are there any other?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
If I may, I'd like to move CRC 0920, which was submitted by Bill Halbach, the regulation of operation of airboats. That is a nighttime curfew from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. with exemptions for government-operated airboats pursuant to official duties.
And since I'm now present at this meeting, I would like to second that motion.
Moved and seconded that we place that before the body. Then I'll recognize Mr. Brinkman then first to speak in favor of the motion.
Well, to me, this is an issue of fairness, respecting the rights of people to operate watercraft of any kind. The fact of the matter is people, I think, have a overarching right to sleep, and that this provides at least 12 hours a day where people living anywhere near a lake or other water body will have the ability to enjoy that right to sleep.
Well, without getting up on a soapbox, because I feel like a group of us have really been on the soapbox about this issue for a long time. This originated more than 12 years ago. And the gentleman who spoke about people building houses near pig farms and, we've heard the argument about people building houses where airplanes take off. This is not an issue like that at all. Most of us who've lived out in that area, we're multi-generational Floridians who are now finding the intrusive problem of a proliferation of these types of crafts. And it is certainly an issue of people who disregard a person's right for good health, because if you're not sleeping well, you're not in good health. And also, it has a real impact on the environment, because when you run airboats all over the lake all night long, you're affecting the waterfowl, the environment, you're destroying a lot of what's been there. And I think that this is an environmental as well as a health issue. And it's something that a group of us are now pursuing through the ballot to put this as an ordinance through the ballot process. We're doing that, but this is certainly an issue that I think that the Charter Review Commission ought to look at and ought to consider.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Little.
may I speak against this motion, please? This is not the county commission. We are not making ordinances here, which is what you're asking us to do. I think we don't have the authority to do this because it's not a part of the structure and function and powers of government. You're just asking us to regulate some particular people. I'm in favor of your proposal. That is the content of your proposal. But again, we don't want to be in a position of having started a situation in which the Alachua County Charter is to be the dumping ground for proposals that somebody wants in the way of ordinances that the county commission, for one reason or the other, has been unwilling to adopt. So I'm opposed to this. I think I don't think we have the power, and I think it's a bad idea to put it in the charter to begin with. If we did have the power.
I recognize somebody would want to speak for it this time. If not.
Mr. Chair, I want to note, first of all, that the County Commission has supported this by a majority vote. The reason it is not already a county ordinance is because state law, and only on this regulatory issue, requires a supermajority vote of the County Commission to regulate airboats. And it only applies 2 airboats. So that deals with that issue. It does have the support of the county commission. And I would say that I think putting regulations in the charter is perfectly appropriate. That's why Charter 1 put the regulatory ability on air and water pollution into the charter. The charter is not a document limited only to higher level issues, I'll say. And I think it is perfectly appropriate to put it in the charter, and let's let the entire electorate vote on it rather than than just having representatives vote on it.
Let me recognize Ms. Ferguson, then I'll go to Mr. Grundy.
Okay.
I'll come back to him in a second. You're recognized.
Mr. Chair, I'm opposed to also putting this language or moving this forward as a charter issue. To me, it's more administrative. It's a legal issue. I just happened to listen to one of the county commission meetings that the sheriff was there, and I hope I'm not misquoting her, but she said something to the fact that if she enforces ordinance, she would need additional resources, which means additional money, which means that's something that the county cannot afford. And to me, just based upon the surface of it, it doesn't. I agree with Mr. Little that it doesn't appear to be the appropriate. The charter doesn't appear to be the appropriate place for this. If they need a what did you say, a 4-1 vote on the county commission? Yes, they do. Then they just have to continue to pursue trying to get the county commission to approve it, as opposed to trying to go through the charter to get that instated.
Thank you very much. Mr. Grundy and then Mr. Ball.
And this, Mr. Chair, this goes right back to what we just dealt with previously with the superintendent issue. This is no difference. We're asking as an administrative, this is not the proper forum. I agree with Mr. Little that we need to send this to the proper forum, which would be the Board of County Commissioners. And I want to remind you all that it was a supermajority vote that was required in that meeting, that threshold was not met at that time. I would encourage the maker of the motion to not go forward with this and take it to the proper forum and take it to the Board of County Commissions. The simple fact of the matter is we're asking to, like Mr. Little said, make an ordinance. And going also with what Commissioner Ferguson said, she was absolutely right. The sheriff did state on more than one occasion, not just this year, but the previous year, if an ordinance was to be made, she does not have the resources currently within the budget cycle to meet this ordinance. So basically, we're going to be making ordinances and laws just to make folks feel good. And if we're going to make folks feel good, let's make ordinances all day long. But if we're not going to enforce them, we're wasting our time. But this board is not the proper forum to make that type of decision. And I think we should send it back to the county commission to make such a decision. I mean, or if you all want to get petitions and get on the ballot as a referendum, you're certainly entitled to do so, but I don't think this is the proper venue to do that. And that's where I think we should send it back where it's appropriate to the county commission.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with Mr. Little's comments. I can think of several examples of issues that are in the state constitution that I was 100% in favor of the issue, but 100% opposed to it. The commercial net ban, for instance. I think it's one of the greatest things that's happened to the state of Florida, and I was 100% in favor of it. I used to be a commercial fisherman. I voted against it not only because I don't think it's the proper place for it. I think it takes the legislative body. It allows them a free pass, if you will. I'm 100% in favor of the smoking ban. I'm so glad nobody's smoking in this building. I voted against that because I don't believe it's supposed to be in the Constitution. I think this falls clearly in that. I am 100% in favor of regulation, various types of regulation of boating, including, and I used to be an avid boater myself, of airboats, but I don't think that it's the proper place for it. And I think it's interesting, and I said this earlier, and I caution members as well, and I'm saying this to myself, that I hear people say, oh, well, let the people decide. But they only seem to say that for the issues they're in favor of. The issues that they're opposed to putting on, I'm not voting for it. So it's either if you want to open this up to let the people decide, then as was stated earlier about these proceedings being used against you, let's roll the tape back, and every time you're opposed to an issue, let's play the tape where it says, let the people decide. because you can't just say let the people decide on the issues you happen to be in favor of. Either you're for letting the people decide or you're not. I just don't think this is a constitution, in this case, charter issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments on this issue?
Let's remember that.
That's right.
Well,
Yeah, John, I was going to say, John, I remember clearly you saying that last meeting, so I will remember that.
and
let's keep-
and Mr. Chair, real briefly, I just wanted to note
Let me
that.
recognize Mr. Little.
Sure,
I'll let
sure.
you conclude, okay?
That's fine.
Go ahead, Mr. Little.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to make arguments. I do want to make some comments to Mr. Brinkman's statements that I think he didn't really mean or didn't think about. Number one, if the Florida legislature tells us by general law that a regulation has to be done in such a way, that controls the charter. That controls the charter as much as it does the county commission. The second thing is, he was not quite correct in saying that we have put a regulation in our county charter with number one. What we said in number one is, in the case of ordinances regulating pollution, the county ordinance will control the municipal ordinance. The regulation itself is a regulation of the county commission, not the regulation of the charter.
Thank you very much. Any citizen wish to
Ms.
forth on this? And
that's fine. Let's take citizens first.
Any citizen wish? Seeing none, Mr. Brinkman to close, and then we'll be ready to vote.
I just like to say that, sometimes, as with some things like the net fishing ban, people try and petition their representative government to do what they want them to do, and they don't. So then they have to do it by direct democracy and take it to a vote of the people. This issue has been being kicked around the county commission for over 12 years. We finally managed to get a majority of the county commission, only to have that not count. I submit that this is an issue which is appropriate to take to the people, and I rest my case.
Thank you very much.
I'd just like to say the same thing, because what happened with those issues that are in the Constitution about net bans and how you handle pig birthing and those kinds of things that probably aren't appropriate are there because officials had been asked time and time again to do something about it, and they didn't. And I think this is that same issue. For 12 years, the county commission has been asked to have something done in this manner, so that's why this issue is before the Charter Review Commission.
And as you indicated earlier, there's also a petition to place the ordinance on the ballot also.
There are petitions that are moving forward.
Should be in favor of the term limit.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to call a question.
All right. I think we're all done here, all through. All right. The question then before you is whether or not we'll send the airboat issue to the attorney for further work. Those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2. Those opposed, raise your hand, please. 12 to 2. Okay. 2 to 12. All right. Any further issues? The hour's getting late here, but any further issues? Yes, sir.
I'd like to propose the supervisor of elections become a nonpartisan election. I made a proposal last week that was predicated on the time I spent working for the supervisor of elections.
Let's see if there's a second.
Mr. Chair, I'm willing to second if we make it all constitutional officers. All 5 of them. I'm not referring to the county commission. I'm referring to the elected constitutional officers. If you'll accept that amendment, I'll second.
We've got a motion, and see if there's a second.
I'll accept it.
Okay?
Now your motion is to make all 5 constitutional officers nonpartisan. That's what you've seconded. So that's your motion? Okay, we now have a motion then, all 5, to propose that all 5 constitutional officers be elected on a nonpartisan basis. All right, I'll recognize Mr. Tuttle and speak first.
I'll speak primarily to the supervisor of elections. I never said how I got there. I got there because in 2000 we were in a little country called Trinidad and Tobago, and we got to watch the 2000 election, which was interesting to see our country from somebody else's point of view. It was unbelievable that any part of our country could be as inept and potentially corrupt as Florida was made out to be by American television, which is what they had in Trinidad. And it was a very spooky thought to see that. It was interesting that shortly after that, Hugo Chavez had his next run in Venezuela, and President Carter was coming down to do oversight in elections, and we had more than one Trinidadian who said, "What do Americans know about running elections?" My real point is that freedom of the press ain't free. It's very expensive, and you give the media any chance to sell space. It can be on television, it can be in print, it can be anywhere else, and they're going to do it. And I think we add a potential taint to the Office of the Supervisor of Elections, which I believe should be absolutely standalone and absolutely untainted. So I think it should be a nonpartisan election. That doesn't mean the supervisor can't have political views. They shouldn't be elected on the basis of politics. They should be elected on the basis of a nonpartisan position. And I would hope that Buddy Irby will speak up as a past supervisor of elections. I'm not sure where he is. But
That's been a long time ago. Let me recognize somebody who's speaking against the motion first. Anybody wish to speak against the motion? Mr. Grundy.
I'll tell you, we have some folks that have run for office, even in our audience, that have run, and as somebody that ran in a nonpartisan race, anybody that knows in the city of Gainesville absolutely knows that just because we say it's nonpartisan, it is not nonpartisan. Everybody knows who everybody is, and if you don't, the Gainesville Sun will identify you who you are. It's not a nonpartisan election. I understand the theory of it. I am in favor of it in theory. I'm not in favor of it because substantively it's a farce. It's not a nonpartisan election. And then not only that, there's a reason why we have partisan elections. I mean, clearly for folks why we have partisan elections, there's a reason why. Because people that are in their party like to vote for their party. They like to have it. There's a reason why we have it. It's worked. I have a problem with the motion having all 5 constitutional officers. So that's also my problem with it. So that's why I'm against it.
I'll be glad
Mr.
to speak
Chair.
against it too. I really,
Let me recognize somebody to speak for
No.
you first.
okay.
All right. Either way, I'll go because I've already spoken, so I'd prefer to defer.
I just like the idea of political parties, and I like the idea of knowing where people are politically. I need to know, to me, what party they belong to, and I believe in the system in which we have elections, that we elect people to run against each other. So I don't, I'm not sure whether this is to include more of the independents who really get to vote in the final election anyway, but I'm not in favor of it.
Okay. Mr. Chair? First of all, I wanted to say that I don't believe this is a reflection, and I don't think the maker of the motion intends it as a reflection against any current office holder, including the supervisor of elections and the clerk of the court, because frankly, I don't even know your party affiliation, buddy. And I think that speaks commendably to how you conduct yourself. The supervisor is well known, but I don't think she has acted in any way inappropriately. However, and I agree with Mr. Grundy's comments about the fact that the media will basically out the political things, but it does also make another fundamental difference. It changes the structure of the election. You have a general election first. Everybody gets to vote. Nobody is selecting who everybody else is going to get to vote on. Everybody gets to vote on everybody. And then if there is a need, there is a runoff. And I think addressing Mr. Wood's comments, I agree with you when the office holder is making policy decisions such as the Board of County Commissions. That's why I specifically clarified nonpartisan for the 5 constitutional officers, not the county commission, because I think it is appropriate for legislative policymakers to run as a member of a political party. But for people who, basically fill an administrative function, I think it's better to take politics out of it.
Ministerial.
Ministerial.
Thank
Okay.
you for or ministers. No. Anyone that wish to talk on this? John?
I have a question first, and then a comment. My question is: could this issue be thrown into the? I hate to call it the what was it? The little.
A little compact.
Right. Little.
Right.
A little compact.
Could this issue be
Certainly.
thrown into a
Certainly.
little idea or something? I didn't like that. Because it's a big idea actually. Could this be put into that?
It could, yes.
It could be, okay. So I wanted to know that procedurally. The other thing, let me just say, because I'm not afraid to sit up here and say exactly, what my background is. I'm about as diehard a Democrat as you could be. I mean, I think anybody who knows my family history knows that we're the old yellow dog Democrats, okay? I have rarely voted for a Republican. I don't think I've ever voted for an independent. I don't think I've even had the opportunity, really, or thought process. But I am a realist at the same time. If you can't see that this country is vastly moving in this direction, that eventually the parties, the more they try to cling to power, the weaker they are getting. And eventually you're going to see a revolt of sorts in that there's going to be drying up of funds, because once these big supporters begin to see that the majority of people are starting to move another direction, so is the money, and that's when everything will really change, when the money changes. I think that it's time for us to be bold enough to look at whether or not we should do this as a nonpartisan basis, because I think that I don't think there's hardly any doubt in my view that if this was on the ballot, it would pass. It's pretty well passed everywhere that it's been put forward. Whether or not it's a constitutional issue that we can do, I don't know. I have to defer to the powers that be. I'm willing to support this idea because I think that the people are already ahead of us on this issue. And I really believe that the parties, if they're going, and let me just say this, because we, and I guess it's because I'm a history major from UF and whatever, and UF ain't too bad, Dr. Will, that I think we forget that this country's history really is not that long of Republicans versus Democrats. We had multiple parties in this country throughout a large portion of our history. And I honestly believe that we are going back that direction. So I think the people are ahead of us in this curve, and I'm willing to at least support this to move forward for legal counsel. Whether or not I will ultimately vote for it in the end, I'll have to give it more thought, but I support it to move forward.
Any further comments? Yeah. Mr. Grundy.
I think, like I said, again, in theory, I agree with it in theory. I think it's just, is it really pragmatic and realistic to think that because we put forth nonpartisan, look, the city of Gainesville is the perfect example. I guess it's somebody that ran in a nonpartisan election. Everybody and their mother knows what your party is. I mean, it's kind of like saying, well, today I'm going to be Oriental or of Oriental background. And I'm telling you that's what I am, but that's everybody can see that I'm not. I mean, it's and that's probably a very bad analogy, but it's saying I could tell you all day that I'm nonpartisan, but again, the proof is in the pudding. When the meat and potatoes of it is everybody knew what office everyone is, because you will be clearly defined by the media and everything else. It's not a nonpartisan election. So I think I agree with you though, Mr. Martin. Actually, that the people are not only ahead of us on this issue, it's where the scope of it is going. But as far as the history of it is, the matter is, the political parties have been getting weaker, not just recently, it's been for a long time. The effects of what a party can do in political elections has been weak for quite some time, not just in recent history, but for a long time. It's more consultants that have power and influence, non-conglomerates, and now, thanks to the Supreme Court, corporations. So you can now have, your sphere of influence is not just with political parties or affiliation. But I think if we're trying to say that we want to increase voter turnout or voter participation, well, we have seen the ability to have our voter turnout is higher been within the county than within the city. Voter turnout recently in this past election, this past week, was 11.2%. It was a nonpartisan election. So we're not increasing our voter turnout because we have a nonpartisan election. Let's not kid ourselves. If we're trying to get increased voter participation, if the city of Gainesville is a measurement of tool, that's not a good measurement. So that is where the proof of the pudding is in a nonpartisan election.
Thank you very much. Further comments before we bring this to a vote? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, the purpose of nonpartisan election concept is not to declare that I'm not a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. It's to eliminate closed primaries so that Democrats, you don't end up with independents being disenfranchised in the selection of the final two candidates at the general election. So nobody said that there won't be Republicans or Democrats. It's just that you won't have a closed primary anymore.
That's exactly right.
And I would just add, and I'm opposed to the concept.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman.
I'm going to recognize Mr. Wood. All right. Mr. Wood's been recognized.
Well, I'd just like to add to that, too. I like the idea of primaries.
if you eliminate primaries and throw everything out into one election, you have limited my right to vote again. And I've already told you how much I hate you limiting my right to vote, because I want the ability to vote in primaries first and then decide whether I want a Democrat, Republican, or Independent. And you know what you've done once again is eliminate that vote.
Okay.
Not me. I think, Mr. Chair, one last question. I want to ask Ms. Blakely, is it in the purview of the Charter Review Commission to even tackle this issue?
Yeah, she opined on this earlier, gave us a write-up on it, and it's within our authority. Am I right on that, Ms. Blake? If you want to come forward. I thought that's what you said. We've got to make some adjustments, but it's within, right.
She's got to speak into a mic.
She'd have to write it up.
Yes.
For the record.
For the record.
The recent court cases seem to suggest that it's within your purview to make these officers nonpartisan, but you have to go through some hoops by eliminating the officers and transferring the duties to some other charter type of officers. And when you do that, then you can...
The little concept.
Going back, that's this concept that's been followed. That's right, and that's exactly what she's followed on the Little, or Mr. Little followed. All right, further comments? Seeing none, and any citizen wish to speak on this? Let me recognize any citizen wish. None, no speaking. Yes, sir, Mr. Martin.
With what she's saying, I don't think that was the proposal before us, was it?
No.
Not at this time. It's a single, standalone proposal at this time.
So this proposal could be, because I'm hesitant to push something forward that ultimately is going to be twisted around some other way and saying that it won't work.
You might want to offer an amendment to place it within the Little.
Yeah, I would like to do that, Mr. Chair. I'd like to offer an amendment that this proposal be put into the concept of the I guess we're calling it the little concept.
Little idea.
The little idea. The big little idea.
All right.
It's a little big idea.
All right.
Something like that.
It's been moved that we place this into the Little Ad.
I'll second that.
There's been a second. That's what I was looking for.
Well,
And I base that solely on what the attorney has said.
We understand.
Mr. Point of order.
Yes, sir.
I believe Mr. Martin was offering an amendment, and I believe you should then check forth the maker and the seconder of the amendment.
Well, he offered his own amendment to be voted on by himself.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. I thought he was seeking a friendly amendment.
Anyway.
So we'll vote on the amendment. That's
right.
fine.
We're going to vote on the amendment first. Any comments before we vote on the amendment? The amendments to place this, should it pass, the main motion pass, place it within the confines of the Little concept. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
I better have the yeas and nays. Those in favor raise their hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And your hand is raised?
Our hands are raised, right.
Actually, I raised mine too as well.
9 yes. Let's see if those voting no. 1, 2.
No, don't count on.
No, I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3. Let's see. That doesn't quite come out right. We're missing.
I raised yes.
Okay. All right. I'm still missing. The no votes are 3. Please raise the no votes one more time. Make sure we got 3.
I think it's only 2.
Little's hand was up. And
All right.
I know, I made a mistake. I was just voting every chance I get.
All right. I've got 11. I've got 11 yes, 11 yes, and 3 no's. 11 yes and 3 no's. All right. The motion then's been amended, so we'll place the main motion as amended before you, which is that we send to the attorney the 5 constitutional officers, making them nonpartisan within the Little concept. Those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. We need 8 votes on this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think we got 8. Those opposed, say, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, and 4. I'm still not getting what I need.
Well,
I'm missing
York
something.
and Stringfellow left.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't see them leave. I'm sorry. Then that makes it okay. All right.
Yes.
So it was 8 to 4.
They voted with their feet.
8 to 4. All right. 8 to 4 was the vote. So we do have one item that we've sent forward this night, and this is it. The other,
Have another one?
the other ones were all defeated.
May we have another one?
We may have another one if you're willing. If everybody's willing
Yeah.
to stay, we don't want to lose a quorum.
I'm willing to stay.
I
All
would
right.
like to test the board here. I propose that we abolish the office of elected sheriff and transfer the function to the county commission for county law enforcement office to be presided over by county chief of police, appointed by the county manager with the approval of the consent of the Board of County Commissioners.
Second.
And if I may speak briefly to it.
It's been moved and seconded. Sheriff appointed by the county manager, am I right?
Correct.
And approved by the county commissioner, okay? Okay, Mr. Little.
The reason I do this is because law enforcement, the policies in law enforcement are very important. And at the moment, the policy formulation is entirely out of the sunshine. And I would like to bring it within the sunshine. And the way to do that, of course, is to have those ultimate policies decided by a board or commission, such as the Board of County Commissioners. And that would be my goal here. I'm not, just like everything else, I'm not absolutely sold on this idea at all. I just like to test it here before the board, the commission, and then decide later on what we may do. I might ultimately vote against it. Mr. Chairman, as you suggested, we have the right to do.
All right. Anyone wish to speak on this issue?
I'd speak in favor.
Okay.
On a slightly different issue, though, I think it's important that the county commission have the ability to affect the budget issue, which is currently a area of contention between the sheriff, not so much the current sheriff, but certainly the previous sheriff, who spent a lot of money suing the county commission. And it strikes me as one of those functions that would readily operate under the county manager system.
Okay.
I'll chime in.
No, I don't know. I didn't see the hands go up. Who was first here?
I don't know.
Let's defer to her and then.
Okay.
I will echo what Tuttle?
Ackerman.
I'm sorry. I echo what Mr. Ackerman said. I mean, for years, the county commission and the sheriff generally battle about their budget. And since I've been in Alachua County, I haven't seen one sheriff who cooperated during the budget process. Either they want to appeal the budget, to the governor, or they just refuse to make the requested budget cuts so that everything is more equitable in terms of when cuts have to be made. So I support the motion based upon just the contentiousness of the budget, of the relationship that the county commission has currently with any sheriff, that they really do not have any authority basically to just say, I want you to cut here, here, here. They basically say, here's your pot, this is what you do. And the sheriff say, well, that's not what I want to do. And I just think that the county commission needs more control over that piece of budget because it's a large share of the county's budget.
Wow. Test the commission, Mr. Little. Interesting. Wow. 8 o'clock at night. Here's my problem with it on the surface is taking away citizens' right to elect their sheriff. If we're going to base this on the issue of the budget alone, I've attended many of those meetings. The one that I recently recall based on the budget, Mr. Ackerman, was specifically I can recall the sheriff arguing about whether to get a helicopter. I remember one, just a memory. But everybody, and I think even Mr. Irby can attest to this, in these economic times, every one of the constitutional officers are struggling and arguing and fighting to get every penny and dime that they can. I remember the Commissioner Chestnut specifically stating to the sheriff about the helicopter, she was wanting more funds and also wanting more funds to give increases to her officers. And I remember the commission, not just the Commissioner Chestnut alone, I won't single her out, but the commission alone stating to her, this body gave you your funds on which to do with what you wanted. You could have chose to give your officers increases in pay or chosen to buy capital improvements for the department. I have a problem, though. I have a problem taking away the right of the citizens to vote for their sheriff. I really do. I think that's many citizens would. I don't think it would pass, but that is my problem with that. But I also do want more accountability, and I think that the citizens give accountability by their right to vote. If you don't like somebody, you can get rid of them, And that's, I think we're taking away that right from our citizens, and that's what I can't support it.
Mr. Chair. I agree with all of the previous commissioners' comments, including Mr. Grundy to a limited extent. It is precisely for accountability that I think we need to remove the sheriff from election because, well, let me put it this way. I was part of a movement to try to persuade the city of Gainesville to institute a police review board. Lately, there's been discussion on the university campus of the same issue for reasons. Thankfully, our sheriff has not had her deputies be involved in an incident which has raised similar concerns with her deputies in, since she's been in office. But the fact of the matter is the difference between an elected sheriff and a board of county commissioners, which would have the ultimate authority, is the board of county commissioners is required to hold public hearings and take public testimony. The sheriff is not. Now, I want to acknowledge I have known the sheriff to go out and do community meetings when there were issues in communities such as Archer. But the fact of the matter is, I think that people need the ability to stand before the county commission and complain about specific instances and acts of the county sheriff. And the county commission would then have the right ability to offer some attempt to redress or at least investigate those instances. Currently, we don't have that with an elected person. Yes, you can vote them out of office, but frankly, if an incident happens and the person stands for election 3 years later, it's not likely to happen. But change could happen if people are appalled at a particular incident and go to the county commission and insist that changes be made. And I think one of the big issues is the standards for use of force, particularly when law enforcement officers are called to deal with somebody of limited mental capacity. I think there's been far too great of an attempt to reach for a gun or other form of weapon when in fact other much less violent means are appropriate when dealing with somebody of limited mental capacity.
Let me go to this side. Rod. I find it difficult to do anything other than support it on the basis that it was proposed. Clearly, the first and primary objective I understand, but I think it's going to take more discussion, and I think we need to have more discussion before we come up with something else. So clearly, I would support this to go on to the next meeting. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too support it for those reasons, and I'm like Professor Little. I may not, in fact, support it when the final resolution comes. I have to really think about this. I do have one question and a comment, though. My question would be, if something like this were to go forward and be passed by the voters, where you're actually doing away with an elected position, how does that work for the person or the position at that time? In other words, we have an elected sheriff now. The charter, it goes forward, it's voted on some form or fashion, and you no longer have a sheriff or a supervisor, whatever. I mean, what happens to that office?
What's the transition?
Yes, I have a question about that.
After her term.
After the end of the term.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
You have a comment?
to address Mr. Martin's point, I would accept, and I'm not the maker of the motion, Mr. Tuttle is, but I would accept, I would be willing to entertain, oh, excuse me, it was Mr. Little, a motion that clarifies that it would not interrupt the term of a currently serving sheriff, that it would have to wait to be implemented until that term expired. It would simply mean that there wouldn't be another election for that office.
Okay, that's kind of what my thoughts. But
I think that's a reasonable question. I don't think anybody wants to take somebody who's been elected to office and remove them from office for no good reason.
And two other quick comments. I know it's getting late. As someone who has done my share of battles with the county commission over the years, various different commissions, and a lot of it on law enforcement issue. I was one of the ones that drove the issue home that ended up going for the lawsuit and all that. I wasn't supporting the lawsuit, but there was issues of funding. Believe it or not, all those major issues started in Hawthorne. I don't know if you've followed the history of that. So my point being, I've been involved in this for quite a long time. I've not always been in favor of what the county commission has done, law enforcement, but it's been funding. But as someone who has sat on an elected board, I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to have the people come before you and complain about budget issues and have such a lion's share of your budget you have really no control of. I mean, that's just maddening. So for that reason, I'm certainly inclined to take a look at this. And I do think there are certain positions that, law enforcement being one of them, that I won't say anymore. I think it has merit, and I'm willing to entertain looking at it. I don't know how I'll ultimately vote in the end.
Thank you very much. All right.
Mr. Woods, actually, he was before me.
Mr. Woods.
Well, I'd just like to say that there are a lot of reasons that people have cited why it might be a better idea to make this appointed rather than elected. And I know that over the last couple of years, I've even put forth to the county manager, and hopefully it got to the sheriff, a manner in which $1 million could have been saved to the jail. But none of that really happened. And, I kind of am at the point where I look at, we went down to Micanopy, and the issue wasn't the county commission when they met, it was issues with the sheriff. And, they have a certain amount of their town budget that they have to pay to the sheriff because they have to, and, those kinds of things that come up all the time. And it may indeed have some merit to be able to do it this way. However, hate to be the party of no down here, but I agree. I like to vote for the sheriff. I want the sheriff to be accountable to me and the citizens in Evanston. I really do. And I want the ability to elect that sheriff. And I think that what we're seeing is hopefully a period in time where revenues will indeed come back up again, and people will have the wisdom to be able to figure out ways of saving money, and that we won't be having this discussion time and time again about budget and whatnot. But again, I support the right to vote.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes,
Let me
I
go to
actually had my hand
Let me
up.
go to Mr. Martin. He hadn't spoke on this yet.
I hear what everyone is saying, and I do have a concern. What I'm hearing is a kind of a one-trick pony type of situation that's pushing this. A sheriff is more than a budgetary officer. And I understand that there are certain issues in which I am very concerned about, an abuse of law enforcement authority. But I don't know if the answer is to dilute that accountability among a series of commissioners. And this is just my opinion, but just to be specifically the examples that occurred here in Gainesville of a perception of abuse of law enforcement authority, not so much from a rogue police force as far as their chief, but more of neglect. Neglect from the leadership, and neglect from the county commission, who did not focus on that. Because of what? The county commission is more concerned about budgetary constraints, and they deferred that issue. City commission, thank you, right. That issue was deferred. So, not that, once again, I hear this, I'm not sure how I'm going to come out on this, but I think there's a trend to want to have simple answers to complicated questions. We want to go ahead. This is simple. It's like that commercial we see with the firefighters talk about. We like clean water. Everybody like clean water. Let's vote. No, I think this is much more complicated than it looks on its face, and it takes a long, hard look at it. So as of right now, from what I'm hearing, unless I hear something more, I don't know if I can support this.
Mr. Grundy.
I want to separate this. I know it's getting late, but I really want to separate. There, from what I'm hearing amongst this body, there's really two separate issues. But the primary issue seems to be amongst this body that it's a budgetary issue is one primary reason, and the other is some systemic problems and issues we've heard around the community. But they're very different issues, and so I really want to address both of them, specifically the issues oriented with police departments. Utilizing and using the issue of the city of Gainesville, first and foremost about the Gainesville Police Department. One is you do have an issue where it's not an elected police official. You have you have an appointed chief, Chief Jones. The issue of GPD and what happened last year, I think we all know the issue of the egg throwing incident. We had some systemic problems here in the city of Gainesville with the Gainesville Police Department. We had an appointed chief. Was there a level of accountability coming out of that issue. Let's look at it on the surface of the matter. We had no accountability because we had the issue of the city of Gainesville. We could not terminate those officers. Take it from somebody that served in the military 8 years. Conduct unbecoming an officer got you put out. You cannot be a police officer and a criminal at the same time. You cannot do it. But we had an appointed chief, a police chief. And I don't care what color the police chief is or where they come from. It was a systemic problem in the city of Gainesville. Most recently, we've seen out of the University of Florida is an officer doing what he did. It was in the paper. We're not going to rehash it. I'm just saying, let's really think about what we're talking about here. Is it really accountability because we have someone appointed or that answers to a body? Well, you know, the chief at that time answered to the city commission. Those officers were not, they were left to their own devices. They're still on the force today. I think that I can say this about the sheriff now, this sheriff. Out of anything, I could say that you could call this sheriff at any time. I've tested it. I remember seeing in the paper, call me if you have a problem. I tested her. I called her. She called me back within 3 hours. It was reasonable. I mean, I think that the level of accountability that we see from this sheriff versus, and I am not downing, and I want to, because I know the Fraternal Order Union Police President will be up here first and foremost saying I'm talking against Gainesville Police Department. I am not. But I am speaking in favor of this sheriff. This sheriff has been accountable to every citizen of Alachua County. But it has been night and day versus the Alachua County Sheriff's Office versus the city of Gainesville. I know people that live in my community that say they would much prefer to be serviced by an Alachua County Sheriff's Officer versus a Gainesville police officer. That is stark. And I mean, that is interesting. I find it that to say that we're going to get better service because we have an appointed sheriff is silly. And I don't think that that's true. I think that we really need to think about this, and I would ask that we table this and really think about this before we push it forward. And the issue about the budget, and I'm going to close, Mr. Chair, because I know I've gone long enough. The issue of the budget, this seems to be mostly based on budgeting and the battle of the sheriff and the battle between the county commission on budgetary issues. We could always put forth a motion or something regarding how we deal with the budget and the sheriff and change the rules or the dynamics rather than just getting, and maybe we can. I see him shaking his head not. But if we're going to make this decision strictly based off the budget, I think that that's not a good reason alone. And I'll close with that.
Thank you for your comments. Further comments before we close here and take a vote? Any citizen wish to comment? Yes, sir. If you'll come up and introduce yourself to us.
My name is David Greenberg. I'm a resident of Alachua County. Because of, I will not express an opinion because of what I'm here doing tonight. I'm a reporter covering the meeting, but I have a question. And I think if you move forward with this, because there's been a little back and forth in terms of, are you suggesting making a third, like right now the county commission, the county manager and the county attorney answer to the county commission, and then the staff answers to the manager or the attorney, depending on where they are. Are you talking about adding a third person, or are you talking about an employee that would be under the manager, much like it is in the city?
That was his motion on the city model. Am I correct, Mr. Lowe? Okay, city model.
That was my motion,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. If the matter passes and gets further along, I think that detail is one that can be reconsidered.
Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote on this. The question before you is whether or not to send to the attorney a proposal that would make the sheriff appointed by the county manager, but it have to be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. Those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 yeses. Those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Am I right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, 7. Okay. 7, 7. It fails then.
There's a tiebreaker.
All right. There's no tiebreaker tonight. All right. It's 8:35, ladies and gentlemen.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Chair, just a point of, there's only 12 members here, so I don't see how you came up with a 7-7 vote. I'm not disputing that the motion failed, by the way, but just for the interest of accuracy.
Let's vote again. I think there's 13 here at the
1,
time.
2,
That's
3,
got one too
4,
many.
5, 6, 7, 8,
And I
9,
think one of
10.
our citizens has a
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry. There are 13.
I had 7 to 7 though, so we got 13. So I'm missing one.
Counting challenge.
It failed, I think that's what.
It failed, I agree,
I
but
want to
Get
record it.
enough yes
It
votes.
wasn't 7-7.
All right, I think it was.
Let's take a revote.
We want to be correct. Those
Be correct.
Let's-
We're
let's-
revoting.
I think you had those in favor correct.
Somebody not
So
vote?
you think it's 7-6? All right. Let
Right.
me get the no's. Let me just get the no's. See if there's 6 no's here. Those no on the question. 1,
Oh, no.
2,
Less than last time.
1, 2, 3, 4,
And yourself.
5. Thank you.
We still didn't get 8, though, so.
Yeah. Any way you look at it,
All right. I used to be able to count votes. It worries me a little.
it is difficult because we're arranged in this semicircle.
That's
I couldn't see Miss Ferguson.
All right.
You hadn't had any opposition.
I got
You had
it.
to count.
I got an
How many
idea here.
guesses did we get? Because it's
All right. Here's what we're going to do. Mr. Ackerman, yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Brinkman, yes or no?
Yes.
I voted no. So
I'm going to call your name. Ms. Ferguson. I'm sorry, Brinkman voted
Yes.
yes. Okay. Ferguson, yes. Glazier? No. Grundy Gomez?
no.
Irby's, no. Little?
Yes.
Abronsi Martin?
No.
John Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Richards not here. Mr. Stringfellow's not here. Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Laura Williams Martin?
Yes.
Ashley Wood? No. And Mr. York? No. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 no. All right. Well, the motion carried, but it did not have the requisite
Right.
8. So that's where we are. All right.
Could be brought up again.
I think so. All right. Let me recognize citizen for a comment. If you'd recognize yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Little.
You would just state your name.
My name's Darlene Pofallo. One of the things I was wondering if the charter is in charge of in making changes, that when the elections are held in the county, whenever there's an item on the ballot for an increase in sales tax or an increase in like choices or anything like that, that increases the taxes of the citizens, that on that ballot, anything that's increased for a sales tax or any tax should go on a November ballot instead of a spring ballot, so more people can be part of the process as far as electing. Because I remember a few years ago we had the nickel sales tax, quarter percent sales tax, half a cent sales tax, and they were all done in the spring. And as we know, the spring elections probably 10%, if less, vote. And I think maybe something like that for the November ballot when there's general elections.
There was
If
a
the-
proposal on our sheet that somebody sent in that exact proposal.
Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you're going to be looking into that? I
Well,
didn't
if
know.
one of the members moves it, then we would. At this point, it isn't before us, but it was on our sheet of possibles.
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That's excellent. I hope you think about it then.
Right.
I hope you bring it up because I think
Okay.
it's important. Thank
All
you.
right.
Now I'd like to move we adjourn.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Then at this point in time, let me just give some information for just a second. We're going to try to work around that April 28th date. It could move a week either way, so please be as flexible as you can on that. We'll do the best we can. I'll leave it to the members. We'll come back at the next meeting, whenever that is, and I would say the citizens check our website and watch for the public meetings. We'll come back at the next meeting with proposals on the things that you voted for at this point in time, and I'll leave it to you whether or not you want to bring up any more, but our hope was to start to conclude that process of new proposals at this night, but it's always up to the body itself. With that, yes, ma'am.
If that meeting stays on April 28th, just to know that I won't be here.
Okay, we're going to move it off April 28th. You can be sure of that. We're going to do everything we can. Let me just take 1 second before we adjourn to recognize the staff here, Rochelle, Mary, and Greg, who you just can't imagine the work that's being done behind the scenes to keep us going. And some of you can. I mean, y'all get these agenda packets, 30, 40, 100 pages, and somebody's doing that work, and these are the team that's doing it. Certainly, sir, we appreciate your contributions as always, and your spare time. So with that, those in favor of it? Yes, sir.
You don't have to answer it now. I'd
Okay.
just like to know in the future. I know we have some policy about, and I understand people have things that come up. We have policy about, and I think the county does, about missing meetings and those types of things. What about coming to meetings but missing votes? I mean, in other words, you get credit for being at a meeting
yeah.
if you stayed and leave, because it's a little bit frustrating to debate all these issues and then come up and not have the ability to, not have, it doesn't matter what side the issue you're on, not have a full quorum is, I don't know about anybody else, but it's kind of frustrating because, I could have been home watching TV.
I understand your comment. And tonight's meeting, I think we'll all agree, ran a little long, and we appreciate everybody's indulgence in sticking with us in that. With that, those in favor of adjournment say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.